Nasa was a lonely, rizzless bum who looked like a character from Stranger Things and was living a miserable life until he was almost isekaid by Truck-kun. However, he is luckily saved by a hot chick who forces him to marry her and smash her. But before that happened, on the day he was born, his parents sadly stared down at him in the cradle as they realized that their new baby was ugly as hell and his head was so round and big like yours, so they decided to call him Nasa. Over the years while growing up, everybody clowned him because of his dumb name. It became so frustrating for this boy that he decided to study hard to become someone people would respect. He tried growing some muscles by doing some push-ups but realized the weight of his watermelon head was pushing him down instead. When he finally got to middle school, he told his useless teacher that he aspired to attend the country's best university. Still, the teacher told him he needed to have the brain of Einstein, and considering his deadbeat parents' broke status, it was impossible. But our guy dramatically told her his name was Nasa, which meant there was no limitation to his dream. The teacher told him to reconsider his dream and choose a backup university. But Nasa walked out, saying nothing would stop him. Later that evening, while walking home, he stared at his exam sheet and realized he had scored A's again. He muttered to himself happily that even life was aligned with his dream. Little did our useless MC know life was a two-timing bitch, because just then, he sighted the most pretty girl in the world on the other side of the road. At that moment, our determined boy let his guard down because all he wanted was an opportunity to get her name. So to do that, he put on his simp cap and began to cross the road without thinking. In that instant, he was hit by a Truck-kun that never misses. This boy lay on the ground with blood spilt everywhere, and all he could think about was dying without getting to know the name of the hot girl. Just then, he looked up to find the pretty girl with blood on her face staring down at him. The truck driver immediately arrived, asking if he was okay. So with that, the girl stood to leave, not without asking the truck driver to take Nasa to the hospital. But the driver pointed out that she would also need the attention of the doctor because she took the brunt of the hit when she got in front of Nasa to save him. However, the girl began to leave, and seeing her leave under the glowing moon, Nasa slowly began to pass out. Shortly afterwards, the truck driver started to call an ambulance, but suddenly Nasa stood up like a horror movie villain, scaring the shit out of the truck driver. He told the driver he was determined to find the girl because she was too pretty to just let go. With that, our boy ran off into the night with sonic speed to catch up with the girl. After running for a while, he finally caught up with her while she was sitting at a bus stop. Seeing him, the girl was surprised that the guy had chased after her despite his life hanging by a thread. That instant, the simp lord desperately dropped a cringy pickup line, asking if she was a star because he was Nasa and would love to study her gravitational pull. Hearing this, the girl was impressed, so she asked him to sit. She used her handkerchief to clean the blood on his face and then gave him her coat. She then stood up, telling him she would call an ambulance because, due to his injuries, he could actually die at any moment. But the ugly gorilla, in a desperate attempt to talk to her, crashed to the ground, so the girl informed him that his legs were broken. She opened the door, telling him she would call the ambulance and asking him not to attempt to move again. Just then, Nasa's consciousness began to fade, but he was determined, so he moved towards her. He told the girl that she looked just like Princess Kaguya in the children's tale, the beloved princess who was loved by many but had to return to the moon. Nasa told the girl that since they might never meet again, he would fight for a chance to be with her. With all the courage in the world, he told her he loved her and would love to go on a date with her. However, the girl told him they could only be together if he married her, to which the total idiot with nothing but wind in his brain agreed instantly and then passed out. Days later, he finally woke up in the hospital and was confined to a wheelchair, but the thought of the pretty girl was always on his mind. He instantly went into a spiral of depression at not knowing the girl's name and never seeing her again. Even though he finally achieved the top score in his class, he decided not to attend the top university. He then took a service job in the hope of meeting the girl again, but that never happened. Time passed and Nasa finally turned 18, but instead of celebrating his birthday, he was depressed and stayed in his room all day. However, that day, his doorbell rang, and as he opened the door, his brain short-circuited when he saw the girl standing before him. The girl introduced herself as Tsukasa, so our boy told her Mikasa Tsukasa. With that, she entered his apartment, and as she was having tea, she showed him their marriage certificate and asked him to sign it. Nasa immediately went hysterical because he had never thought she was serious about the whole marriage thingy. However, Tsukasa told him that if he didn't want to sign, it would be fine. So he quickly grabbed the paper and signed it faster than a ninja on a foot race. After that, she told him she was a good judge of character and believed he would take good care of her. With that settled, The Yunjins headed for the marriage ward office to legally bind it. On the way there, Nasa realized Tsukasa was the only human on Earth who had never made fun of his name. However, Tsukasa informed him that NASA had many scientists and engineers who worked together to fulfill the dream of humanity traveling to space. So his name wasn't funny at all. It was a fantastic name that meant any dream could be achieved. Soon after, they finally arrived at the office, and the old man was surprised to see a young couple getting married because he was an old, ugly bachelor who no one wanted. However, he signed the document and handed them a flower as a gift. Later on that night, Nasa paced around in his room, still shocked that he was now a married man. He wasn't mentally ready to start living with someone, and his apartment could only fit one soul. Then, there was a really serious problem with where his new waifu would sleep since he had just one bed. With that in mind, he thought about purchasing a new bed, but it was pretty late, and the delivery wouldn't arrive until the next day, and then began to analyze the different positions that could fit both of them on the bed. Just then, Tsukasa popped out of nowhere, asking why he was talking to himself like a madman, which gave Nasa a total shock. She then showed him her briefcase telling him she was there to commence their couple life. With that, Nasa moved to make her coffee, and she revealed that she didn't have any home to return to. So they would spend every night together from then onwards, which nearly paralyzed Nasa's nervous system. However, she suddenly realized that his bed was too small to fit even a rat, so she suggested she spend the night at a hotel instead. Hearing this, Nasa became depressed, but Tsukasa assured him that even though his living condition was worse than that of a homeless beggar, she was his wife and would never leave him. Hearing this, Nasa stared at her and pondered why on earth a pretty chick would want to spend the rest of her life with a horrendous loser like him since he hadn't even done anything for her. So he asked Tsukasa why she had decided to marry him since they hardly knew each other. Tsukasa replied that the question was pretty silly and then asked why he had agreed to marry her without knowing her. Nasa responded that it was because he loved her, so Tsukasa answered that she also wouldn't marry someone she didn't love. After that, she stood up to leave for the hotel. But before she got too far, Nasa chased after her and begged her to stay, promising he would do anything in his power to buy a foot-in even though he had to walk to the end of the earth. However, deep down, our boy had a feeling that if the chick left, she might never return to his crappy apartment. Tsukasa agreed, and they headed for the nearest convenience store to get a mattress and a foot-in. Inside the store, Tsukasa was surprised that her boy husband was pretty knowledgeable about the different types of futons, even more than the manufacturers. Following that, Tsukasa grabbed his hands, and the miserable simp jizzed from all things, and they spent hours shopping together. Hours later, they returned to the apartment, and Tsukasa found the mattress was pretty comfy. Nasa, on the other hand, still couldn't believe that a hot baddie was sleeping in his room. Just then, Tsukasa searched for the bathroom, but realized the young man didn't have any, so Nasa informed her that he used the local bathroom every morning, so she suggested they go for a stroll to get the stuffs at the convenience store. Later on, Nasa arrived with a bag of female supplies, so Tsukasa changed into the pajamas. Seeing her, Nasa had a spit take when he realized this girl was pretty even with pajamas on. So later on that night, Nasa turned off the light, and they both went to bed. However, Nasa found it difficult to get any sleep knowing the girl was sleeping just close to him for the first time in his pathetic life, making his heart pound faster than a hyena on steroids. Suddenly, he realized that his wife was a restless sleeper, so he tucked her back into bed and thought of giving her a goodnight kiss, but he felt the kiss wouldn't be perfect since she was not conscious. Just then, Tsukasa stood up and sleepwalked into the kitchen to drink water, and when she returned, she took his blanket, leaving him cold till the next morning. The next morning, Nasa woke up thinking all that had happened the previous day was all a dream, but when he saw Tsukasa behaving like she had no memory of what happened last night, he realized he was really married for real. Just then, Tsukasa began to take off her pajamas, so he quickly screamed for her to remember she wasn't alone. Then he retreated to the other room to give her some privacy. When he returned, he found Tsukasa adorned in an apron, asking why Nasa had been referring to her in a formal way since they were married. So they both decided to give each other pet names, which made Tsukasa blush, causing her face to turn red. Later, Tsukasa found Nasa's refrigerator organized and full of food. She was surprised the guy could actually cook, unlike most Gen Z dudes that live on takeout. Nasa informed her that he had done a scientific analysis on the nutritional needs of an adult male and found out that eating hot pot every day was the way to a healthy lifestyle. However, Tsukasa remarked that cooking wasn't chemistry and then pulled a culinary move like a Michelin chef. She then made an Instagram-worthy meal, which was far better than Nasa's regular hot pot. So Nasa tasted the food and realized the girl could actually cook. Tsukasa then revealed that she could make just about anything as long as she had ingredients. After eating, Tsukasa asked about the bathhouse, and after hearing this, the pig realized he hadn't bathed for days. However, just then, he thought about how wonderful it would be to see Tsukasa without Aniplot armor. Since Nasa only had the basic bathing supplies, they went to the convenience store to get a skin moisturizer and toner. Seeing all the bathing stuffs, the monkey was surprised because he only used soap. Finally, they arrived at the bathhouse where they met Kaname, one of Nasa's classmates. Kaname was shocked to see Nasa with a girl because she had initially thought his meat would be donated to the museum for lack of usage. Following that, Nasa then introduced Kaname to Tsukasa. Kaname had been managing the bathhouse for years to help out her family. On the other hand, Kaname suddenly noticed the weird chemistry between Nasa and Tsukasa and then asked if they were dating. Nasa then mentioned that they were married, which stopped the girl's heart for a minute, causing her to faint. However, she congratulated them on their marriage and told them they could bath for free as a gift from the house. With that, Tsukasa then entered to take a bath, and as Nasa trudged along, Kaname stopped him with her broom. She told him she had never believed in her wildest imagination that he would get married because she had actually thought he would remain single till he was 70 and become a wizard. She then asked when the marriage ceremony would be held, but Nasa awkwardly mentioned that marriage ceremonies are just a waste of money these days. Hearing this, Kaname criticized him for not being man enough to make his woman happy. She told him he had a responsibility to make her happy, so Nasa, with a burning eye, vowed to make his wife happy for the rest of his life because he loved her. That moment, Tsukasa overheard him and was a bit embarrassed the guy was shouting love on the street like a maniac. Later on, Nasa had his bath and thought just about how lucky he would be if he could just see his wife in her full glory. Suddenly, Kaname popped out of nowhere and teased him for having a very, very tiny willy. On the other hand, Tsukasa entered the bathing parlor to find it empty, so she decided to enjoy some peaceful bath time alone. However, her alone time was interrupted by Aya, the elder sister of the family, who accidentally entered the bath and then apologized repeatedly like a crazed person for intruding on her privacy. Aya then offered to help wash Tsukasa back as a way to show she was truly sorry. As she washed Tsukasa back, she commented on her smooth skin, which she likened to silk and then an iPhone X, but she apologized almost immediately for comparing her skin to silly things. Following that, they both introduced themselves, and Aya was stunned when she realized that Tsukasa had Nasa's surname. She asked if Tsukasa was a relative or family member, to which Tsukasa lied by saying that she was his younger sister. Several hours later, Nasa dreamt about the night he met Tsukasa. However, he was jerked out of slumberland when Tsukasa woke him up that she was done bathing. Aya then approached them, telling Nasa that she had met his younger sister, which confused him. However, he decided to play along that Tsukasa was truly his younger sister. On the other hand, Tsukasa asked Aya how she was acquainted with Nasa, and she explained that they were classmates. She added that her grandfather, who handled the business, had died years ago, causing the business to take a turn for the worse. But thanks to Nasa, who used his marketing skills he learned from YouTube to help revive their business. Shortly afterwards, Nasa and Tsukasa walked back to the house. Tsukasa then asked Nasa if Aya was pretty, and the clueless idiot yapped on and on about how super cute the girl was, not knowing it made Tsukasa really jealous. Just then, they passed through a marriage ceremony going on while walking, and then Nasa noticed Tsukasa having a terrible mood swing, so he remembered Kaname's words about how a marriage without ceremony sucked. With that, he assumed Tsukasa was sad because they hadn't done their marriage ceremony when all the girl wanted was for him to just compliment her as he did Aya. She informed him that she just wanted to be pretty, so then the foolish donkey handed her a key to the apartment and bolted, telling her he would make the impossible possible. Seeing him run, Tsukasa was confused, wondering how hard it was for him to just tell her she was pretty. Few minutes later, Tsukasa was back in the apartment and was lonely. She wondered when Nasa would be back, so in the meantime, she decided to flex her domestic muscle by cleaning the house, but she realized that the house was already spotless, so she thought of cleaning the closet and under the bed because people hardly clean those places. However, she restrained herself because she assumed the disgusting pair of a husband might have some thirsty, steamy magazines hidden inside. Just then, she heard the doorbell ring, and when she opened the door, she was surprised to see the yellow-haired girl named Chitose. Chitose immediately made fun of the crappy apartment she was staying, saying that Kennel was far better, so Tsukasa shut the door on her ugly face. With that, the yellow-haired dwarf began to bang on the door, saying she had come to pick her up since her sudden disappearance had made the grandmother so worried. Shikasa then informed her she was married now and wouldn't be going back ever, and then shut the door of the apartment again. With that, Chidose left the apartment very sad and sobbed on the staircase. Just then, Nasa found her crying on the staircase and started to comfort her. Chidose explained her problem to him of a family member who escaped. She described Shikasa as a free-flying glass butterfly who easily got hurt and would disappear the second you let her out of sight. Just then, Shikasa interrupted their conversation when she heard Nasa's voice. That moment, Chidose immediately put two and two together and became furious as hell when she realized that the dude she had been talking to all this while was the idiot who married Shikasa. Nasa then tried to be the cool dude to actually convince her he was the right man for Shikasa, but she kidnapped him without a second thought and drove him all the way to a mansion. Inside the mansion, she told Nasa that she would frame him up using implicating pictures of him. She then called on two hot maids, Charlotte and Aurora, and asked them to get freaky photos of Nasa. Hearing this, Charlotte didn't waste any time stripping, but Chidose covered her up instantly, telling her to chill. However, while they were talking, Nasa used the opportunity to run off and then began to examine his surroundings. He suddenly found himself inside a room, and as he sniffed the atmosphere like a police dog, he realized the room should be Shikasa's. Just then, he sighted a rock on display, recognized its shape and composition, and then realized it was a moon rock. He wondered how Shikasa had managed to get a hold of a moon rock since they were artifacts that should be in a museum. Just then, Charlotte stormed into the room wielding a giant sword that could cut even the firmament of heaven and swore to annihilate him for trespassing. However, in an attempt to separate Nasa's ugly head from his body, she accidentally hit the glass casing of the moon rock, almost breaking it and causing the nitrogen to leak. However, Nasa displayed his electrician skill and fixed it. A few minutes later, Chidose revealed that it was Shikasa's gift to the family and was shocked when she realized that the guy knew little about his wife. Just then, she remembered how Shikasa had actually saved her while mountain climbing when they were little and was pissed because she felt Shikasa shouldn't have married this dumb. Without wasting time, Charlotte commenced the infidelity plan, while Aurora took pictures and photoshopped it perfectly with the speed of lightning. Seeing the photoshopped pictures, Nasa was shocked that the girl had fabricated the pictures so fast. That moment, Shikasa somehow appeared inside the room and found the pictures. Chidose immediately told her to divorce the terrible cheating man, but Shikasa asked for a private conversation with her husband, and unknowingly, it was a ploy to escape. On getting outside the room, Nasa apologized for the picture and explained he was framed, but Shikasa told him she was not dumb because she could tell the picture was photoshopped. On the other hand, Chidose and her evil maids finally realized they had been scammed and tried stopping them. At the same time, Shikasa revealed a hidden passageway that led to an old church. With that, Nasa took advantage of the opportunity to be in a church to propose to her. He professes his undying love to her and then lip-clapped her for the first time. The following day at home, Shikasa was in the mood to watch a show on TV, but that was when she realized that her broke husband didn't have any TV. Even worse, the guy knew nothing about movies and TV, making her wonder what he had been doing all his life. So she took it upon herself to give him a passionate TED talk about the importance of TV to the life of an average otaku. Hearing this, Nasa was surprised that his usual laid-back wife was a fiery vixen when it came to movies. So with that, they went TV shopping. Shikasa suggested they get a cheap one as she would be happy regardless. Later that day, at the bathhouse, Nasa dramatically informed Kanam that he had proposed to Shikasa. Kanam then asked if he bought a ring for the proposal, to which the ugly moron told her he had never thought getting a ring was important. Hearing this, Kanam boiled in anger, telling him that a ring was one of the top 3 things any husband would get for his wife. So while waiting for Shikasa to be done with bathing, Nasa watched on TV a couple celebrating their engagement with a diamond ring, so he wondered how much a diamond ring would cost. Later, on their way home, he informed Shikasa that he would be going to work that afternoon. They then stopped by a park before heading home and watched the scene silently. That moment, Nasa wondered if Shikasa was sad because she would be alone when he headed to work, which led him to conclude that he needed to get the diamond ring so she could remember him anytime he wasn't at home. Following that, they returned home, so Nasa mentioned that he was heading to work, but he became worried that Shikasa might be gone when he got back. However, Shikasa told him to return on time, and he would surely see her. At work that day, Nasa thought about Tsukasa and wondered if she was lonely. concluding that getting a ring was the best thing so she would always remember him. After work, he returned home to find that Tsukasa had already prepared dinner. So while they ate, he suggested they got a diamond engagement ring as a symbol of their love. Hearing this, Tsukasa was surprised to see him acting so romantic. However, she informed him that they were married and that getting an engagement would be weird. She told him what they needed was a wedding ring, but suddenly realized Nessa was just a brain-dead moron who didn't know the difference. With that, she schooled him on the difference between an engagement ring and a wedding ring. After the lecture, Nessa was more convinced than ever to get a diamond wedding ring. Tsukasa tried telling him that a diamond ring would cost an arm and a leg, but Nessa was more stubborn than a goat and insisted on getting one. Seeing that her word would never get through his thick skull, she decided it was best he found out himself. So the next day she took him to a diamond ring shop, and Nessa was mortified to find out just how expensive a diamond ring was. The saleswoman revealed that the ring was expensive because they were of the highest quality and it was a lifetime opportunity. With that, Nessa was convinced and was about to spend his parents' gratuity on getting the ring, but Tsukasa dragged him out of there before he could. She explained that she intended to show him how expensive a diamond ring was and not for him to spend all his family's savings purchasing one. However, seeing that Nessa was adamant on getting the ring, Tsukasa then took him to a lower quality store. Getting there, Nessa was shocked that the prices were cheap compared to the first shop. But to Tsukasa, they were still expensive, so they left the store. Nessa then revealed to her that he really needed to get the ring, so anytime they were separated, she would look at the ring and think of him. Hearing this, Tsukasa was impressed that this guy would go this far for her, so she kissed him on the cheeks. With that, she took him to the cheapest store, and they purchased the cheapest ring available to mankind. However, Nessa was skeptical about the emotional value of the ring since it was very cheap, but Tsukasa informed him that the price didn't matter. It showed that he really did care for her, and anytime she looked at it, she would be reminded of the fact that he loved her. For several nights, Nessa noticed Tsukasa's habit of sleepwalking, wandering around clumsily, grabbing water, and then dozing off in random places. One night, she even ended up crawling into his bed. Though embarrassed, Nessa mustered the courage to hug her. Just then, she briefly woke up, kissed him, and then fell asleep on the floor again. Her restless sleeping habits often kept him from sleeping well. So the next morning, he decided that this couldn't continue and that she shouldn't keep ending up on the floor. He figured they needed a bigger bed, but their apartment didn't have room for one. He thought about moving to a bigger place and imagined a home with a living room and a larger TV, excited by the idea. He asked if Tsukasa would be interested in moving to a bigger apartment, but she liked the coziness of their current place because it kept them close. At the bathhouse, Kanam heard they were thinking about moving and was surprised to learn Tsukasa was sleeping on the floor. When Nessa explained that Tsukasa was happy with their setup, Kanam remarked that she'd be mad if her future husband kept her in a small apartment with no bath. That evening, Nessa accidentally walked in on Tsukasa while she was changing, catching a view of her peaches in 4K flustered. He suggested they move to a bigger place to avoid future awkward moments like this. However, Tsukasa was concerned about the expense, but Nessa reassured her that a bigger place could also mean a projector for movies and a bookshelf for her film collection. Hearing this idea got her excited since she was a huge movie lover. With that, they decided to start apartment hunting but realized they'd need a guarantor. At that point, Nessa remembered he hadn't yet told his parents about his marriage. So he called his mom, briefly mentioned he was married, and quickly hung up. He explained to Tsukasa that he'd also told his parents about his accident and how she'd saved him. Since they needed his parents' help with the apartment, they thought it would be a good time for Tsukasa to meet them. Although nervous about meeting his parents, Nessa soon received texts from his mother, who guessed that he was asking for help with the new apartment, and that was the reason he called. In return, his parents requested a visit from the couple. Since his parents lived in another prefecture, Nessa thought it might be a nice opportunity for a honeymoon too. Tsukasa then suggested they buy a camera to capture memories of their life together in a photo diary, while they journeyed to his parents' home. They started by taking photos of Tsukasa near a lake, and Nessa discovered he had a knack for photography. The next day, they traveled to Kyoto, snapping photos along the way. Meanwhile, Chidose and her maids had been spying on them and wondered why they were taking the bus instead of the high-speed rail. Determined, they followed the bus in a car. On board, Tsukasa slept peacefully, while Nessa found the seats uncomfortable but pretended he was fine for her sake. As they rested, Chidose watched them with envy, announcing her determination to break them up. Her frustration only grew as she saw how close Nasa and Shikasa had become. On the other hand, Charlotte and Aurora mentioned that they looked sweet together and wondered why Chidose would really want to break up such a nice couple. Chidose silenced their mouths, telling them she was certain they would break up because newlyweds often ran into problems during honeymoon. On getting to a stop, Nasa misplaced his wallet, so he dashed back to the bus to find it. Seeing this, Chidose laughed mischievously because she had never seen such an empty-headed buffon and thought this would definitely get Shikasa angry. However, Shikasa was cool with his idiotic behavior. Later on, Nasa decided they eat at the food court, but Shikasa loudly insisted they try something nice instead of eating at a chain restaurant. So they tried a food spiced with lime, and Nasa took some embarrassing pictures of Shikasa, which made her upset. Seeing this, Chidose expected them to break up over the issue. However, they settled with Nasa, telling Shikasa that she could eat whatever she liked. So Shikasa chose to have melon bread, to which they settled. This made Chidose very angry, so she confronted Shikasa, saying she was disappointed in her choice of men and with her acting all lovey-dovey with the donkey like she was some normal girl. Shikasa told her she was indeed a normal girl, and just then, a television show crew arrived for some content for a dish. So the couple took advantage of the distraction to escape, avoiding being put on camera. While inside the bus, Shikasa pointed out her fears of Nasa's parents not approving of their marriage, but Nasa assured her that he would convince them. On the other hand, Chidose ordered her maids to catch up with the couple that had escaped, but the hungry girls were busy devouring food like starved animals. Hours later, the couple finally arrived in Kyoto, and Nasa was excited to spend the day exploring the city with Shikasa. However, Shikasa was more interested in visiting Kyoto's bakeries, which sent shockwaves to Nasa's brains because he never expected her to be interested in seeing a bakery when there were over 1,000 bakeries back in Tokyo. He pointed out that the city was full of distinctive shrines, temples, and exciting historical places, but he suddenly realized she was more of a Gen Z who didn't give two shits about history. Although Shikasa wasn't particularly interested in historical places, she reluctantly decided to accompany him. Shortly afterwards, Shikasa tried on a kimono, and Nasa was awestruck to see her in a kimono, causing his brain to fry. Just then, they once again encountered Chidose and her maids. With that, Nasa then suggested Charlotte and Aurora take Shikasa around Kyoto while he and Chidose had a private talk. Once alone, Chidose announced she pretended to be his girlfriend to test if he was truly man enough to have Shikasa. Determined to prove himself, Nasa went all out, suggesting they take a rickshaw ride while they talked. Meanwhile, at a cafe, the maids questioned Shikasa about her feelings for Nasa and why she had chosen to spend the rest of her life with such a lowly loser. She confessed that she found him cute, and that moment with a flashback, she mentioned that she loved how he had always praised her in the presence of others. At the same time, Nasa took Chidose to a popular dango shop. After this, Chidose demanded to know why he loved Shikasa, prompting Nasa to enthusiastically share how cute and pretty Shikasa was, which pissed the hell out of the girl. With this, she revealed she knew Shikasa better, and Nasa knew absolutely nothing about his so-called wife. She also revealed that Shikasa was very athletic, apart from her being cool and collected. Upon saying this, she furiously stormed out, muttering to herself that she never believed Shikasa would choose to spend her with a total dweeb who knew absolutely nothing about her when she could have just stayed with her. Just then, Nasa shared how Shikasa had saved him from a truck 2 years prior, saying he'd felt destined to be with her ever since. He added that even though he didn't know Shikasa as well as she does, he intended on spending his entire life proving their love was real. Later on that day, Shikasa asked Nasa if he convinced Chidose to approve of their love. Nasa responded, telling her that Chidose had decided to return to Tokyo for now. With that, the couple boarded a bus and then made their way to Nara to meet Nasa's parents. On the way, Nasa shared that, although he grew up in Tokyo, his quirky parents had decided to move to Nara because his father was an archaeologist and his mother loved deer. Shikasa then asked if she would be able to get along with his parents because they were complete weirdos. Nasa responded, telling her that he would ensure everything worked out fine. When they finally arrived, they were both nervous about approaching Nasa's parents. However, they tried to cheer each other up, only to spot Nasa's mother, Kanoka, spying on them. With that, they finally entered the house, and Kanoka introduced herself as if she were a mental patient. She then revealed that Nasa's father, Enishi, had been so nervous about meeting them all day that he hadn't moved all day. Later on, they finally get to sit with Nasa's parents, and just then, while they talk, Nasa's weird parents start to have a schizophrenic episode. Suddenly, Anishi insisted that Nasa take a bath, and though Nasa resisted, Tsukasa encouraged him to go so she could talk to his parents alone. Later, after the bath, Tsukasa mentioned having a good with his father but wanted to keep the details a secret. Shortly afterwards, they moved to Nasa's old room, and while they explored it, Kanoka interrupted, asking if they would be spending the night there. Nasa told her yes, and then she reminded him that their bedroom walls weren't soundproof in case of any happy noises during plot development. That night, Nasa awkwardly asked Tsukasa to sleep on his arm, to which she agreed. She moved closer to him, and the pair finished from too much enjoyment. However, just then, his weak arm soon fell asleep, making him uncomfortable. With that, he asked for a goodnight kiss instead before drifting off, which Tsukasa obliged, and they exchanged mouth fluids. The next morning, Tsukasa watched the sunrise and was joined by Anishi, who called her an early riser. Hearing this, she shocked Anishi by calling him father-in-law and nearly gave the old man a heart attack. After that, they exchanged small talk and then went to see Anishi's library, where he was surprised by Tsukasa's ability to read old documents. Just then, Nasa joined them and was equally surprised, as he hadn't realized she liked historical documents. Later on, Tsukasa revealed her plan to make Nara enjoyable by taking photos of her husband at old shrines, since she wasn't particularly fond of historical places. Following that, they visited Nara's great Buddha statue, and Tsukasa spent a lot of time taking embarrassing selfies of Nasa's ugly face. After this, they toured other historical sites, and Nasa was both shocked and impressed by Tsukasa's knowledge of these historical places, but Tsukasa merely credited this to her good memory. Minutes later, Nasa suggested they took selfies together like every normal couple did, so they took a sweet selfie together, but Tsukasa just assumed the cultured idiot was taking advantage of the slightest opportunity just to touch her plots. Later on, they headed to the site of the Heijo Castle, which was empty as its buildings had been moved to Kyoto. At the empty grounds, Tsukasa felt saddened that so few traces of past residents remained, so she insisted they record videos to keep their memories alive forever. Later that night, Anishi threw himself on the floor, thanked Tsukasa for saving his son's life, and expressed how they could never fully repay her. He then pleaded with her to continue looking after Nasa, and she promised to do her best. Soon it was time to leave, and Tsukasa left behind many funny pictures of Nasa for his parents. Although their trip was short, Tsukasa enjoyed every moment and revealed that she was always at ease when they were together. Several hours later, they returned to Tokyo to discover that their apartment had burnt down. Fortunately, Tsukasa packed most of her belongings in her suitcase. Nasa was delighted that the tree, which was a symbol of their love, had survived, which surprised Tsukasa, who cherished even the smallest details about their relationship. However, Nasa informed Tsukasa not to worry because he was well prepared for emergencies, having set up insurance, stored valuables in a safety deposit box. After this, he suggested that they headed to the bathhouse to cool off steam and plan their next move. As they walked, Tsukasa, impressed with the way Nasa had handled the bad situation. Shortly afterwards, while relaxing at the bathhouse, Nasa thought about moving to a hotel with his wife, but his disgusting cultured mind started having some nasty thoughts. However, just then, Kaname appeared from nowhere. Following that, Kaname suggested they stay at the bathhouse for the meantime until they could find a new place, which excited Nasa, and he agreed. Following that, Kaname showed them around the building where they would be staying. After this, she felt a bit concerned for her sister, Aya, who had a crush on Nasa and was too dumb to realize that Nasa and Tsukasa weren't siblings but a married couple. With that, she approached Aya, telling her that Nasa and Tsukasa would be living with them, which gave Aya a total shock. Kaname then tried to indirectly tell Aya that Nasa and Tsukasa were a couple, but the balloon head just couldn't catch on. Just then, Nasa interrupted their conversation, thanking Aya for accepting them into their home, but the girls still hadn't noticed his wedding ring. Nasa then mentioned introducing Tsukasa to his parents in Nara. Hearing this, Aya almost pieced it together, but this girl certainly wasn't the sharpest tool in the box. Just then, the girl's mother entered, saying she had just spoken with Nasa's wife, which finally activated Aya's brain cells, making her realize Nasa was a married man. With this realization, she was both furious and sad, so her mom consoled her by comparing her sad situation to her own, whose husband had left. On the other hand, Nasa felt bad, but Kaname reassured him, suggesting Aya would be okay and that her own hesitation had prevented her from pursuing him a long time ago. After crying for a few seconds, Aya regained her confidence and told Nasa to take good care of Tsukasa while she pursued her dream of becoming a game streamer. A few days later, Tsukasa mentioned that they were low on clean clothes, and when Nasa offered to do the laundry, she shyly declined, embarrassed at the thought of him handling her underwear. While sorting through their dirty clothes, Nasa took a sniff of Tsukausa's cloth, only to be caught by Kanama, who called him a filthy, ugly pair. Later, Nasa and Tsukausa went to the laundromat, where she taught him the proper way to wash clothes since he hadn't been too thorough before. She then confessed to Nasa that she was currently only wearing her tracksuit with no melon cover or peach armor, which nearly choked the life out of the boy. Seizing the rare moment, Nasa snapped a photo of her, feeling it was too good an opportunity to miss. Later that day, Kanama encouraged Nasa to take Tsukausa shopping to replace the clothes they lost in the fire, hinting that she would lose her batty appearance if she continued dressing like a homeless person. With that, Nasa thought her words made sense, so he took Tsukausa to the shopping mall where she tried on various clothes, and eventually, they moved on to buying underwear. Being in the underwear section made him very embarrassed, so Tsukausa held his hand to help him stay calm, but ultimately, they decided it was better for her to shop alone there. Finally, as they headed home, Nasa asked if he might someday see her in cute underwear, though they quickly dropped the topic because it was too embarrassing to talk about. After enjoying their stay at the bathhouse, Nasa found the room a bit old-fashioned and looked forward to eventually moving out. On the other hand, Tsukausa prepared dinner for them, which Nasa loved since his family were big fans of fried foods. He found the pork with sauce delicious and expressed his hope to enjoy her cooking for the rest of his life. Just then, Kanama arrived with a muskmelon as a gift, and the couple was impressed by its sweet, heavenly taste, deciding they should find a way to repay Kanama for her kindness. With that, Nasa tried to be romantic by feeding Tsukausa a piece, and although she was a bit embarrassed, he insisted, hinting that she had also fed him earlier while they traveled, so she agreed and he mouth-fed her. The next day, Nasa's former landlord called and invited him to look at a newly constructed apartment. Kanama, on the other hand, was disappointed by the news, as she found their awkward love story amusing and enjoyed every bit of their stay. However, since the landlord had a good relationship with them, he offered the couple the same rent as before. So later that day, they toured the model home and were amazed by the elegant design, detailed hallways, and views from the high-rise. They were especially impressed with the bath that had a view. Nasa then imagined baths, while Tsukausa was looking forward to shared bath time. On getting inside the master bedroom, they marveled at the huge bed, far larger than their old futons. So after the tour, as they walked home, Nasa resolved to work hard to afford the rent of the place. But Tsukausa reassured him that she'd be happy wherever they lived as long as they could make it feel like home. The following day, Kanama shared her routine working at the bathhouse, where she woke up at 5:30 each morning to clean before school. When Tsukausa volunteered to help, Kanama initially refused, saying she was a guest. However, Tsukausa insisted, feeling uncomfortable staying there without contributing. Eventually, Kanama allowed her to help, and Tsukausa discovered that NASA's inventions had automated much of the cleaning to make the bathhouse more efficient. Kanama then assigned her some hard-to-reach spots, but was impressed by how thoroughly Tsukausa cleaned. After this, Kanama thanked Tsukausa for saving NASA's life, expressing how much she admired him and how he had helped her family. Later that day, Tsukausa asked Nasa about his favorite food, and surprisingly, it was curry. Hearing this, Tsukausa then decided to get curry ingredients, and Nasa joined her on the shopping trip. While they were on their way out, they ran into Kanama's mother, who suggested Nasa take his wife to a park for some spicy moments to liven up their marriage, but Nasa was too dense to catch her drift. After that, they continued to the supermarket, and on their walk home, Nasa joked that he felt lucky they weren't a high school couple, or there'd be parents waiting to scold them. Just then, Tsukausa teased him about accidentally leading them to an abandoned park and playfully asked if he had any cultured thoughts in mind. Upon hearing this, Nasa admitted he only planned to kiss her, but Tsukausa felt too self-conscious after eating a garlic bun, much to Nasa's disappointment. After that, she admitted she found the park peaceful as if they were the only ones in the world. Suddenly, Nasa hugged Tsukausa from behind tightly, grabbing her soft melons. Surprised, Tsukausa admitted that although the hug was a scary one, it still felt nice. Nasa then asked if she was happy to be married to him. She wondered why he was asking such a weird question. However, she responded that she was because being with him brought new experiences, and she learned a lot of new things every day. With that, the two lovebirds then embraced themselves passionately. Days later, Chidose and her maids discovered that Nasa and Tsukausa's apartment had burnt down. However, just then, Tsukausa coincidentally passed by the burnt building, so they questioned her about her current living situation. Chidose was horrified when Tsukasa jokingly mentioned that she was living in the local playground now, inside one of the play structures, but when Chidose entered to see how it was humanely possible to live there, Tsukasa managed to escape the horrible girl. Meanwhile, Nasa had been organizing and sorting through the old stuff in their room, when he found an old grilling machine, so he decided to throw a taco party. He then invited Aya and Kaname, but Kaname shared that Aya was still uncomfortable due to the whole marriage stuff. Just then, Chidose burst inside the bathhouse after tracking Tsukasa down. Seeing her, Tsukasa joked that she was living on the bathhouse floor, which the fish brain believed and was greatly concerned. However, Nasa spared the state of her dried brain any further humiliation by explaining they were simply staying in a borrowed room at the inn. With that, Chidose and her maids explored the bathhouse and ended up having a fantastic time. Although Chidose enjoyed the bathhouse's services, she asked why they hadn't stayed at her mansion instead. Tsukasa explained it was because Chidose didn't have a game console. Chidose exclaimed that she'd buy every gaming system just to lure Tsukasa to her mansion, but Aya, who also loved games, got caught in her enthusiasm instead. Later that day, with everyone together, Tsukasa decided to start the taco party. Just then, Aya challenged Tsukasa's cooking skills to see if she was worthy of being Nasa's wife. After that, Aya then challenged her to a Street Fighter match instead. As the game battle began, Nasa revealed he also enjoyed playing games like Minesweeper and Solitaire. At the start of the first round, Nasa quickly lost to Tsukasa, and though Kaname put up a fight, she was also defeated. Charlotte and Aurora then decided to crank the party a notch and organized a gaming tournament, where Nasa owed the winner a favor provided it was something he could do. With that, Chidose, Aya, and Tsukasa entered the tournament, with Chidose having a devious plan of making Nasa do a handstand naked if she won just to humiliate him. But Aya defeated her flawlessly, and after Chidose demanded a rematch, Aya crushed her again and again in Street Fighter. Tsukasa then played her match, and Chidose revealed that she used to play video games all day. When Tsukasa lost, she joked that she was rusty and demanded a switch to the original version of Street Fighter. Since Aya didn't know how to play the retro version, she quickly lost. As the two continued to play, the rest of the party realized the girls had forgotten about the prize and were playing for their pride instead. On the other hand, Tsukasa and Aya then adjusted to the older controls and ended in a tie after a double knockout, after which they congratulated themselves in the spirit of good sportsmanship. The party then shifted back to making and enjoying tacos, and as Chidose watched Tsukasa cooking happily with Nasa, she started to accept their marriage. The maids began to tease her, asking if she was done plotting her evil against the happy couple, to which she responded that as long as Tsukasa was happy, she was good. After the party, while they washed the dishes, Nasa asked Tsukasa what she would have requested as her favor if she won the tournament, and she gave him a nice kiss. The following day, Nasa learned that the system at work was down, and it seemed to be a pretty serious issue. When Tsukasa asked what was wrong, he explained the situation at work, and she gently reminded him to take it easy, knowing he often struggled to stop working once he started. However, Nasa dove straight into work and continued for hours until he suddenly came down with a cold. Noticing his flushed face, so Tsukasa spent the rest of the day nursing him, keeping a cold towel on his forehead. Later that night, she used a cool cloth to help soothe him, but as she dabbed lower down his dangled region, Nasa became embarrassed and asked her not to go any further to prevent turning his little John Cena into the Rock. That night, as they slept, Tsukasa held his hand, though Nasa thought he might be imagining it. She then hugged him from behind, telling him she'd been worried about him all day. Hearing this, he turned to her, and they shared a kiss. However, when he tried to smooch further, Tsukasa scolded him, reminding him to rest and regain his strength. The next morning, Kaname mentioned to Tsukasa that if she planned on attending the festival, she'd need to wear a yukata as a married woman, so Tsukasa bought yukatas for both herself and Nasa. As she changed into hers, Nasa asked if he could get a glimpse, and she allowed him a quick peek. However, he was completely captivated by how stunning she looked in the yukata, so he gave her a kiss, only for her to shove him aside, reminding him they'd be late if they got too distracted. Later that day, as they prepared for the festival, Nasa couldn't resist taking many photos of her. When they arrived, Tsukasa immediately wanted traditional tacos, and after eating, they saw Kaname and Aya working at a goldfish catching stall to support local businesses. Tsukasa proudly claimed she was skilled at catching goldfish, and Nasa tried to impress her, only to end up with nothing. Next, they visited a nearby shrine where Tsukasa made a wish for a happy marriage and for Nesa's health. She confided in him that while others admired his dedication, she often worried about his well-being and would keep encouraging him to take better care of himself. In response, Nesa hugged her, grateful for her thoughtfulness, and Tsukasa said she wanted him to live a long and healthy life. Soon after, their friends joined them to watch the fireworks. Nesa then shared that he had taken many photos of Tsukasa, which he'd never delete, even if they were a bit embarrassing. Surrounded by friends, the couple watched the summer fireworks, and Nesa hoped they'd be watching them together every year for the rest of their lives. Several months later, Nesa came through with the big boys flex by presenting his wife, Tsukasa, with an iPhone 16 Pro Max. The moment Tsukasa laid eyes on it, she was more jolly than a pudgy bastard seeing a burger. Finally, she could ascend to Instagram baddie status, so she wasted no time handing the phone over to Nesa, asking him to set it up and admitting she had the tech skills of a caveman. Nesa worked his nerd magic, but before he could finish explaining how to use the camera, Tsukasa took a pic of his planet-sized forehead and slapped it on as her wallpaper, calling it a masterpiece. Not stopping there, she insisted that Nesa's number had to be the very first in her contacts. The next day, Tsukasa flexed on Kaname, bragging that she was now basically the next Steve Jobs. However, Kaname asked her to chill because, at the end of the day, it was just an iPhone, not the secret to immortality. Casually, Kaname suggested they swap WhatsApp contacts, sending Tsukasa into yet another spiral of excitement. Aya, catching wind of this, barged in like the FBI, demanding they add her also to the WhatsApp group. Later that day, Nesa got a call from his old job asking him to cover a shift. He agreed, but Tsukasa reminded him of how that job used to stress him out. Despite her protests, the travel-sized Kelvin Hart was able to convince her, and she begrudgingly let him go. That evening, all dressed and ready to clock in, Nesa informed Tsukasa that he might be gone all night and then bid her farewell. As Tsukasa strolled back into the bathhouse, she bumped into Kaname, who, learning Nesa wouldn't return until morning, teasingly asked Tsukasa if she'd miss her baby husband. Instantly, Tsukasa froze at the question, and while glitching like a poorly coded NPC, insisted she wouldn't get all mushy just because Nesa was gone for one night. Nevertheless, Kaname suggested she could send him a sticker whenever she felt lonely now that she had a phone. Defiantly, Tsukasa, trying to play the tough girl, claimed she wasn't clingy and would be fine. But as the hours dragged on, Tsukasa found herself spiraling into peak boredom, checking her phone every 2 seconds like a Twitter addict waiting for drama. Desperate, she hovered over the sticker button but quickly withdrew, telling herself to stay strong. Aya, noticing Tsukasa acting like a dumped girlfriend, assumed Nesa's absence was hitting her harder than I hit your mom last night. So she speculated that Nesa was probably just as down bad, itching to text her. Excited at the idea, Tsukasa refreshed her messages, only to realize Nesa had ghosted her. Aya, sensing an incoming emotional meltdown, reassured Tsukasa that Nesa was probably drowning in work. Still, once Aya left, Tsukasa couldn't help but spiral, questioning if her Humpty Dumpty husband had straight up forgotten about her. But she knew her man was the ultimate big-headed simp, and there was no way in hell he wasn't thinking about her. However, as night fell and her inbox remained just as dry as my ex-girlfriend's privates, Tsukasa slumped into full-on gloom mode, convinced she had been ghosted by her own husband. Nearly in tears, she finally received a message from the simp, apologizing for being MIA and explaining he couldn't use his phone at work, but missed her, bringing Tsukasa some much-needed relief. At bedtime, Tsukasa absent-mindedly prepared Nesa's bed, only to realize she couldn't function without her man. Meanwhile, after surviving a nightmarish shift, Nesa dragged himself home looking like he had been train-wrecked by 50 cougars. He tried to sneak in quietly, but surprise, Tsukasa was still up, waiting for him like a loyal protagonist's waifu. She admitted she couldn't sleep and had to wait for his return. As they climbed into bed, Tsukasa suddenly hit Nesa with a goodnight kiss, her first time making the first move, leaving Nesa completely stunned, questioning if he had just unlocked a new route in their romance. Still shaking from the unexpected kiss, Nesa was even more stunned when Tsukasa insisted on sharing the same footing with him. Without awaiting his response, Tsukasa scooted closer, leaving Nesa puzzled about why his usually composed wife was acting so needy. Curiously, he wondered if her behavior stemmed from missing him so much. Before he could piece it together, Tsukasa demanded another goodnight kiss, explaining that their day apart had left her craving extra attention. Overjoyed at this, Nesa eagerly climbed over her, ready for some rim action. He admitted he'd missed her too, and then pressed his lips against hers in a heated kiss. However, he abruptly paused the spicy jammer juice moment, realizing Kaname and Aya might still be awake and could overhear Tsukausa's pounding plot cries. The next morning, Tsukausa berated herself for her clinginess and the foolish things she'd said to Nasa the previous night. She cringed at how down bad she had been the night before, questioning if she had actually said all that to Nasa. The shame was so real she could barely look him in the eye. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, Kaname materialized from nowhere, teasingly asking Tsukausa how she felt after getting her rusty engine oiled up. Instantly, Tsukausa snapped, yelling at the nosy creep to mind her own business and get a life. Noticing Tsukausa's defensiveness, Kaname grinned, confident her hunch was spot on, and playfully begged for a sneak peek at their OnlyFans action next time. Exasperated, Tsukausa shouted at her to stop, clarifying that she and Nasa hadn't had any steamy moment last night, and even if they had, they were married. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Charlotte and Aurora barged into Chidosei's bedroom, and upon seeing Chidosei still asleep, Charlotte marveled at how one girl could be so flat. Suddenly, Chidosei awoke and angrily demanded to know why Charlotte was invading her space. But instead of retreating, Charlotte decided to massage her buns to see if she could increase her cup size. Later during breakfast, Charlotte casually informed Chidosei that Nasa and Tsukausa had gotten frisky last night, prompting Chidosei to choke on her drink. Shocked, Chidosei demanded how she knew, and Charlotte revealed that the previous day, she'd visited the bathhouse and overheard Nasa, Tsukausa, and Kanan discussing it. Though annoyed, Chidosei consoled herself, reasoning that Nasa and Tsukausa were a married couple free to do as they please. That night, both Nasa and Tsukausa were on edge, hesitant to even get in bed, paranoid that Kaname might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to drop another shameless comment. But Nasa, running on zero sleep, decided enough was enough. Just as he convinced Tsukausa to stop overthinking and go to bed, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Kanan, with a smiling emoji asking him to have fun giving Tsukausa his 2-inch missile, igniting Nasa's fury. The next day, Nasa busied himself, working on his laptop like a dedicated nerd. Noticing this, Tsukausa, engrossed in her gaming, asked if he wasn't distracted with her playing right beside him, to which Nasa replied he didn't mind at all. Impressed by his focus, Tsukausa grew determined to test just how unwavering he could be. To challenge him, she switched the TV to a quiz show channel. When the first question aired, Tsukausa prompted Nasa to answer, and before she could even process it, Nasa, like an Einstein prodigy, answered correctly while still typing away, leaving Tsukausa both shocked and amazed. With this, Tsukausa realized distracting Nasa during work would be as impossible as getting your hairline back.
Emotional, damn it!
Suddenly, Aya burst into the room and, somehow sensing the situation, suggested they turn the whole thing into a battle of feminists versus alpha males. Moments later, Charlotte stormed in, declaring she joined the contest too. Thus, the competition began, pitting the girls as a team against Nasa, the lone guy. When the second question about chocolate came up, before the saltwater brain girls could even respond, Nasa, still tapping at his laptop, delivered the correct answer, leaving them utterly baffled. Seeing they were losing badly, the girls resolved to play dirty, determined to distract Nasa by any means necessary. Strategizing, Charlotte devised a foolproof plan of distraction and seduction guaranteed to work on any simp, dressing Tsukausa in a maid outfit. Initially, Tsukausa doubted it would succeed, but Charlotte confidently assured her no guy on earth could resist a maid costume. With the plan set, Tsukausa donned the maid outfit and was presented to Nasa to throw him off. Upon seeing Tsukausa, just as Charlotte predicted, Nasa nearly combusted on sight. His brain blue-screened and fried at the same time. But even with his systems crashing, Bro still got the final question right, causing the girls to lose their minds, rolling on the floor and throwing tantrums. Later that night, sitting alone in the room, Nasa couldn't stop replaying Tsukausa in the maid outfit, secretly wishing to see her in it again. Unbeknownst to him, Tsukausa overheard his cultured inner monologue and was floored to realize her husband was a certified pair of obsessed with maid costumes. Quietly, she stepped into the room and asked Nasa if he truly wanted her to wear it again. Instantly, Nasa began trembling like he was having a seizure, unable to even form a coherent reply. However, Tsukausa revealed an extra maid uniform Charlotte had left behind and offered to put it on if that's what he really desired. Overwhelmed, Nasa stood dramatically and confessed that was exactly what he wanted. The following day, while cleaning the bathhouse, Kaname advised Nasa that as a married Gen Z couple, he and Tsukasa should engage in romantic, fun activities typical of their age instead of acting like boomer couples with marital issues. Reflecting on this, Nasa realized that since marrying Tsukasa, he hadn't taken her on a proper date. Eagerly, he asked Kaname for romantic suggestions suited for young couples their age. That's when Kaname dropped the latest trend, seifuku dates. Basically, couples rocking school uniforms for their date. Aya, popping in from the void as usual, co-signed the trend, hyping it up as a global phenomenon. Surprised, Nasa remarked he'd never heard of such a thing, to which Kaname retorted that nerdy goblins like him wouldn't know much about worldly trends. However, Nasa pointed out that the date wouldn't be impossible since he and Tsukasa were delinquents who'd never attended high school. Dramatically, Aya revealed she was a creep with a collection of school uniforms from various schools, shocking Nasa. Still, Nasa highlighted another problem, convincing Tsukasa to wear one, prompting Kaname to insist passionately that it wasn't reason enough to abandon the idea. Confidently, Aya chimed in, assuring Nasa she'd get Tsukasa into the uniform. With determination, Aya marched into the bathhouse and asked Tsukasa to go on a date with Nasa in a school uniform. However, Tsukasa shut it down immediately, saying she didn't own a uniform and had no intention of cosplaying as a high schooler. Sensing Tsukasa's reluctance, Aya slyly remarked she understood and said Tsukasa might look like a hungry blobfish in it anyway. Provoked by this, Tsukasa bristled and agreed to try it on to prove Aya wrong. Sometime later, Tsukasa strutted into the room wearing the school uniform with knee-high socks, causing Nasa's head to heat up to 100 degrees at the sight. Noticing his reaction, Charlotte demanded his opinion, to which Nasa gushed that Tsukasa looked incredibly cute in the outfit. Satisfied, Aya admitted she only baited Tsukasa into wearing it, and, along with Kaname, pushed the two lovebirds, declaring it was date time. Later that evening, hunched over his laptop, Nasa couldn't stop replaying Tsukasa in that uniform, his brain now fully corrupted. Once again, Tsukasa, standing right behind him, overheard his degenerate thoughts, and at that moment, the last screw in Nasa's head came loose. Stammering, Nasa tried to apologize for his cultured tastes, but Tsukasa reassured him that his transparency was actually kinda cute. Then, shocking Nasa into another dimension, she declared she'd wear it again just because it made him happy. With that, Tsukasa stepped out and soon returned, now dressed in the school uniform. Overwhelmed by how adorable she looked, Nasa tried so much to hold back his anaconda. However, after watching Tsukasa strike various jizz-worthy poses, Nasa couldn't hold back any longer and asked to bend her over. Blushing, Tsukasa deemed it a bit too much but compromised, saying he could take off her socks instead. Waiting no time, Nasa removed one sock and kissed her leg, sending Tsukasa into a fluster. Before she could even recover, Nasa leaned in and stuck his wiener into her face hole, but Tsukasa pulled back, playfully declaring that as punishment for being naughty, he'd have to remove the second sock too. Several weeks later, after watching some low-budget shark movie on TV, Tsukasa was mad with its ending. Moreover, she grew even more irritated that Nasa had worked all day, barely giving her any attention. To ease her frustration, Nasa suggested they go see a movie, instantly making Tsukasa all giddy. So later that day, they arrived at the cinema, and upon entering, Tsukasa marveled at the luxurious seats. Hesitantly, she insisted Nasa didn't need to spend all his paycheck, but Nasa reassured her that since she rarely went out, she deserved it. Soon, the movie began, and while Tsukasa watched like an engrossed otaku, Nasa fixated on her, still amazed that an ugly, big-headed bastard like him had bagged such a kinky baddie. Throughout the film, the dingus studied Tsukasa's every reaction to the plot's twists, like he was about to write a PhD thesis, even as she sobbed at the end. Sometime later, while cleaning the bathhouse as usual, Kaname asked Nasa if he and Tsukasa had ever considered a wedding. Thoughtfully, Nasa replied that they hadn't discussed it, prompting Kaname to suggest he bring it up with Tsukasa, emphasizing that weddings were mostly for the brides. Before leaving, Kaname added that a wedding would let Nasa see his stunning waifu in a dress, which was all the motivation he needed. That evening during dinner, Nasa asked Tsukasa if she'd like a wedding. After a pause, Tsukasa answered that she didn't want one, explaining it involved gathering dozens of people, hosting a pricey reception, kissing publicly, and wearing a fancy dress, all things she disliked. Despite her reasoning, Nasa remained determined to have one. Noticing his persistence, Tsukasa tested his wedding knowledge by abruptly asking how he'd arrange a ceremony. Caught off guard, Nasa blurted that he'd call the venue first to check availability and book it. Suddenly, Kaname burst in, scolding Nasa that planning a wedding wasn't as simple as he thought, stressing that planning a wedding wasn't like ordering pizza. Later that evening, sitting outside, Shikasa, still aiming to dissuade Nasa, teamed up with Kaname, and together, they asked Nasa just how much he thought a wedding should cost. Confidently, the clueless Rugrat estimated around 150,000 yen, prompting the girls to spit out their drinks in disbelief. Laughing, Kaname called him a delusional he-goat and then showed him on Google that the minimum cost of a wedding started at 7 million yen, freezing Nasa in shock. Meanwhile, at the mansion, while sparring with the girls, Charlotte, somehow aware of the wedding talk, asked Chidose if she'd attend Nasa and Tsukasa's wedding. Slightly flustered, Chidose shyly admitted she would. Teasingly, Aurora asked if she'd sabotage it, but Chidose angrily denied it, explaining that though it cringed her, Tsukasa marrying and actually wearing a wedding dress would delight their grandmother. Simultaneously, at the bathhouse, Nasa stared at his phone, reeling from the realization that throwing a wedding cost more than selling his kidney. Confused, he also couldn't grasp what betrothal money was or why it added an extra million yen. Overhearing him, Aya shouted from the lounge, explaining that betrothal money was a gift one family gave the other alongside engagement presents. Additionally, I told Nasa that weddings were costly and often took couples a year to plan. Surprised, Nasa argued that she was capping hard since people married daily, but Aya raised her voice, clarifying that those couples had planned a year ahead, shocking him further. Eavesdropping, Tsukasa chimed in, telling her bird-brained husband that a year of planning ensured everything was perfect for that one day. Moreover, Tsukasa admitted the stress of it all made her uninterested in the effort. Encouragingly, Aya suggested they shouldn't give up without trying, proposing they buy the latest Zexy wedding magazine for wedding tips. Later that night, Nasa and Tsukasa visited the convenience store for milk and to also grab the Zexy magazine. While walking home, they paused at a junction to skim the hefty publication. Nevertheless, even after browsing it, Tsukasa expressed that she liked their current life, going to movies, getting ice cream, walking to the store, and how peaceful it was. Gently, Nasa asked if they should shelve the wedding idea for now, to which Tsukasa agreed it was too soon, adding that they'd get the chance someday. Meanwhile, back in Nasa's former school, his teacher Yanaji was bored with life since Nasa had left school. She hardly had time for anything except work, no time for any sports activity, and even when an ugly bozo tried asking her out for a date, she asked him to go jump off a cliff because she didn't have the time to date anyone. Later that evening, as Yanaji stepped out of a convenience store, she ran into Nasa, and they eagerly exchanged pleasantries. While catching up, Yanaji spotted the wedding band on Nasa's finger, prompting Nasa to reveal he was now a married man. Shocked beyond belief, Yanaji assumed Nasa had turned into a weed-smoking crackhead ensnared by some bad chick after failing to get into college. Determined, Yanaji insisted on visiting Nasa home to rescue him from the evil chick that was ruining his life. Upon arriving at the bathhouse and seeing Tsukasa's charm, Yanaji softened, and the two introduced themselves. Though initially wary of Tsukasa's pretty face, Yanaji's growling stomach betrayed her, and she ended up enjoying a delicious meal at their place. Stubbornly, she resisted being won over by Tsukasa's cooking, but then she noticed the genuine love between Nasa and Tsukasa. After dinner, Yanaji inquired from Nasa what he planned on doing with his life in the future. She persisted by asking if he planned on getting a corporate job or getting a high school certificate, to which Nasa replied, saying he wasn't thinking much about the future but was just enjoying the present moment with his wife. Still, Yanaji demanded to know if Nasa wasn't anxious about the future, to which Nasa pointed out that since he couldn't predict the future, it was important he enjoyed the present. Hearing this, Yanaji was stunned, so while heading home that night, she thought about all Nasa had said and how she had been living her life like a corporate junkie without having any fun. So she decided to call the dude from earlier that had asked her out and then agreed to go on a date with him. The next morning, while at the bathhouse's front desk, an arrogant douche in a white suit barged in, rudely demanding to see Nasa. Annoyed by his attitude, Tsukasa demanded to know why the skeleton face with his stickman body wanted to see her husband, sparking a heated shouting match. Angrily, Tsukasa called the dude a typical worthless Reddit Discord mod that only showered once a month, while the guy retorted, labeling Tsukasa a suckerfish-faced chick shaped like an iPhone.
Emotional, damn it!
Fortunately, before it escalated further, Nasa intervened, introducing the blonde jerk as his cousin Jinga and Tsukasa as his wife, shocking Ginga into momentary paralysis. Shortly afterward, Jinga apologized to Tsukasa for his rudeness and for saying she was flatter than a cutting board. That said, Jinga then informed Tsukasa and Kaname just how valuable Nasa had been in the past and how Nasa had helped both him and his crew. Changing the subject, Ginga, with a serious expression, then demanded to know the reason why Nasa had gotten married. Nasa calmly replied, saying he got married because he loved his wife. Still in disbelief, Jinga asked Nasa to prove it by kissing Tsukasa, as that was the only way he would buy their true love crap. Hanan also jumped in supporting Ginga and asking Nasa and Tsukasa to prove their love, since she rarely heard rhythmic clapping noises from their room since they claimed to have gotten married. Offended, Tsukasa snapped that she didn't need to prove anything, but Nasa was unbothered and fine with a kiss. After some coaxing from Nasa, Tsukasa agrees, and just as they leaned in, Jinga halted them, admitting he believed their love and didn't want to see Smurfs kissing. Curiously, Nasa asked Ginga what brought his jacked-up face to their home, and Jinga revealed he needed Nasa's brain power. Displaying a cat cage, Ginga explained it held a stray they'd found, intending to feed and release it, but after learning abandoning it broke animal welfare laws, they brought it to Nasa, recalling his past as a loner who cared for cats. Exasperated, Nasa called Ginga a dust-brained idiot, pointing out he should have taken it to a vet first. Later, Nasa and Tsukasa took the cat to the vet for grooming and a checkup. As the doctor opened the cage, the cat emerged, immediately hissing at Nasa. Assuming they were its owners, the doctor asked for its name, and after eyeing its brown fur, Tsukasa decided to call it Toast. Stepping outside, Nasa told Tsukasa they'd have to keep Toast as a pet for now. Just then, Jinga rushed in to check on the cat, and Nasa informed him they'd care for it until it recovered, which Ginga happily accepted. After the checkup, the vet assured Nasa and Tsukasa that Toast was no longer hostile and was healthy to go home. That night, while sleeping, Toast crept up to Nasa like an affectionate feline and licked his face. However, after Nasa fed it in the middle of the night, the ungrateful low-budget Garfield ate its fill, and then promptly ignored Nasa like dog poop, curling up next to Tsukasa instead. Before leaving, Jinga handed Nasa a couple tickets to a theme park as a marriage gift. When Tsukasa saw the tickets to the theme park, she grew ecstatic and resolute to visit the park no matter what. She even went to sleep very early that night so she could wake very early the next morning. So the following morning, even though it rained, Tsukasa was determined to go to the park, and on getting to the park and seeing so many cute mascots, Tsukasa was delighted she came. Nasa then suggested they start the park adventure by getting passes to the most popular attraction in the park, and also enter some of the rides in the park. Nasa also got them raincoats because of the downpour, and was awestruck to see just how super cute Tsukasa looked even in the raincoat. Meanwhile, Chidose and her nosy maids also somehow made it to the park, and on seeing Nasa and Tsukasa all lovey-dovey under an umbrella, they were determined to spy on their flirting in the amusement park. On the other hand, Nasa and Tsukasa started off their adventure by entering the Grim Reaper House of Terror. Inside, they got to see lots of creepy things, and while taking a ride, Nasa noticed the unending excitement on Tsukasa's face. After the Terror House, their next stop was a space tour, and inside, they got to see Star Wars characters and even had a spaceship ride to a pretend outer space. Unexpectedly, upon exiting, they ran into Yanagi, who shared she decided to ditch her lonely life and visit the park with Taniguchi, the teacher who'd asked her out. Furthermore, Yanagi told them that the said teacher, Taniguchi, claimed to have won the ticket to the park, which sparked Tsukasa's curiosity. Tsukasa knew it was all cap, and Taniguchi wouldn't have won the ticket to the park, so she hurriedly used the excuse of going for the next ride to get Nasa out of there. Once alone, Tsukasa confided to Nasa that being seen with Yanagi might ruin Taniguchi's plan to confess to her. Furthermore, Tsukasa explained to her dumb baby husband that Taniguchi hadn't won the tickets. He'd fabricated it to bring Yanagi, whom he liked, to the park. Shortly afterwards, Nasa and Tsukasa decided to go for their next adventure, which was pirate-themed, but there they found Yanagi and Taniguchi, so they decided to play commentators and analyze the body language between Yanagi and Taniguchi. Just then, they noticed Taniguchi was trying so hard to hold hands with Yanagi, but because the guy was a scared little slob, he fidgeted and pulled back. As a result, Tsukasa reasoned that there was no way in hell Taniguchi would be able to score points with Yanagi if he continued to be a timid, half-assed loser. However, on getting inside the pirate ride, Yanagi took the initiative to hold Taniguchi's hands because she was scared of the ride, causing the dude to have a sudden nervous breakdown. After the ride, Taniguchi was pulling all the weight to express how he felt to Yanagi, but was too cowardly to do so. Even when Yanagi had asked why he had invited her, Bro was too chicken to say anything and froze to death. While they strolled, they noticed a bunch of people gathered near a church, causing Yanaji to curiously ask what was going on. Taniguchi explained that there was a wedding ceremony going on, prompting Yanaji to ask if people actually got married at a theme park. Taniguchi explained that people did, but it cost a whole lot of money to pull it off. Inspired by how happy the couples were even while standing in the rain, saying their vows, Taniguchi was more determined than ever to make his confession known to Yanaji, so he suggested they go have lunch. Simultaneously, after roaming the park, Nesa felt exhausted and proposed to Tsukasa they eat too. As they passed by, Chidose and the girls spotted them and trailed them to the restaurant. Upon entering, Tsukasa noticed it was an all-you-can-eat buffet and suggested a game where each picked foods they thought the other would enjoy, then swapped, to which Nasa eagerly agreed. Meanwhile, Chidose and the maids, unable to spy from outside, donned masks and slipped inside. On the other hand, Nesa made a selection of awkward dishes for Tsukasa, and on seeing it, Chidose and the girls were positive that Tsukasa would surely be mad. However, to their greatest shock, Tsukasa remarked that she liked it. Meanwhile, after having lunch, Yanaji was about leaving, and then told Taniguchi that she had a great time. But then the fireworks erupted, catching Yanaji off guard. Sensing Yanaji's excitement at seeing the fireworks, Taniguchi casually remarked that he also had fun with her. Without thinking, Yanaji blurted out, asking Taniguchi if he would love to marry her.
Yes! Hell yeah!
But realizing that she had effed up, she tried apologizing for sounding like some desperate knucklehead. However, Taniguchi asked her not to worry, grabbed her hand, and then, with all the courage in the world, confessed that he liked her. Meanwhile, on seeing that Nesa and Tsukasa getting along just fine, Chidose urged the girls to return to the mansion, deeming their mission pointless. Months later, Kaname brought a broken vacuum to Nasa for repair, explaining that it had suddenly stopped working. Confidently, Nasa grabbed a screwdriver and noted he could fix it as long as the circuits weren't fried or snapped. Swiftly, he unscrewed the cover, and while rambling about technical details, he pinpointed the issue and, like Jimmy Neutron, restored it to perfect condition. Just then, Aya burst in, announcing she had a request for the all-knowing Nasa. Curiously, Nesa asked what was wrong, and Aya explained she had final exams at month's end. Worriedly, she admitted she hadn't studied, and her brain was emptier than old shells, and failing would force her out of school and into starting an OnlyFans. She finally mentioned that she needed Nesa's help in tutoring her for the exams. Hesitantly, Nesa pointed out he'd never finished middle school, making teaching a high schooler nearly impossible. But Aya shouted that even drunk, he was 100 times smarter than her and could teach her well. With that, Nesa agreed and asked to see her books. After going through her books, Nesa was shocked when he saw how basic it was and then wondered how one person could be so dumb. After also checking out her quizzes, Nesa then decided to put together a series of daily questions for Ai, and then assured her that by working on them daily, he could almost guarantee she would not end up as a stripper, which excited Ai. Hearing this, Tsukasa then asked Nesa if he was sure about it, and Nesa assured her that he had a knack for predicting exam questions like some guru. He explained that using the statistics of past tests and imagining the mindset of the test writers, it was pretty easy to predict the exam questions. Seeing how reliable and smart Nesa was, Tsukasa was highly impressed. The following day, Tsukasa entered the room to find Nesa still working on his laptop, finger glued to the keypad, so she suggested he took a breather from work and then grabbed his shoulders, causing Nesa to glitch. Tsukasa told Nesa that his scrawny body was as stiff as a rock and then suggested she give him a massage. She placed a futon on the ground and then asked Nesa to lie on it for the massage. With no choice, Nesa laid on the futon and then revealed that it was the first time a girl was actually massaging his body. After a few backstrokes, Bro could feel all types of emotions and then thought it would be best he returned the favor by also giving Tsukasa a massage. So immediately after Tsukasa was done with the massage, Nesa shyly asked to also give her a massage, giving Tsukasa a total shock. Tsukasa initially declined, claiming she was fine and didn't need her plot massage, but noticing Nesa's discontented face, she reluctantly agreed but asked him to massage only her shoulders. Excited, Nesa assured her he would be the best masseur and then immediately started massaging her shoulders. In the process, he realized her body was as soft and warm as a newborn baby's butt. But Tsukasa asked him to stop abruptly, complaining that even an ape would massage gentler than he did, and then asked him to be more gentle. Later that day, Kaname curiously asked Nesa how often he kissed Tsukasa daily. Flustered, Nasa snapped, saying it wasn't her business. Undeterred, Kaname revealed she'd seen a YouTuber ex-athlete who kissed her husband 1,000,000 times daily, sparking her curiosity about Nasa and Tsukasa. Irritated, Nasa told her to go get piped by some trailer park hobo and stop prying into his marriage. Realizing he wouldn't budge, Kaname offered a tip, asking if he knew he could kiss Tsukasa beyond her lips. Confused, Nasa inquired what she meant, and dramatically, Kaname explained a Twitter find. Kisses' meanings vary by location: ear for seduction, throat for need, palm for supplication, and then handing him a list of kiss spots and their significance. So later that night, while staring at Tsukasa doing the dishes, Nasa was fixated on the kisses and the meaning depending on the location. However, Tsukasa snapped him out of thinking by saying she was going to the store to get vegetables, to which Nasa agreed to go with her. After shopping on the way back from the store, Nasa was trying so hard to catch the scent of his wife's hair. Tsukasa then noticed him sniffing like a dog and asked what he was sniffing at. Shocked, Nasa finally admitted that her hair smelled nice, so he had to sniff it. Tsukasa, surprised, replied, telling Nasa that despite being a nerd, sometimes he behaved like some circus freak. She told him he could just ask, and she would have let him touch her hair. Embarrassed, Nasa then asked to touch her hair, and Tsukasa allowed him to. But while stroking her hair, Nasa couldn't help but keep thinking about the kiss on different places on her body. While still on their way home, they bumped into Yanaji and Taniguchi smooching lips, causing their brains to evaporate. Caught off guard, they had never expected the relationship to have advanced to the plot level, giving them a total shock. Later at home, Tsukasa entered the room carrying a box of grapes and mentioned that it was given to her by Kaname. While they ate, Nasa still couldn't get his mind off the kiss, but shockingly, Tsukasa mentioned that Kaname had also given her the same list of different kiss locations and their meaning. Hearing this, Nasa was stunned and then revealed to her that the psycho also gave him the same list. Out of nowhere, Nasa finally summoned the courage to kiss Tsukasa on the neck, and then the couple spent the rest of the entire night kissing each other on different parts of their bodies and loudly declaring their meanings. The following week, Kaname was stunned to see her long-absent mother return to the bathhouse. Deliberately, Kaname pretended not to recognize her as payback for abandoning her kids to chase after men with huge balls, which only made the woman ramble like a lunatic. Desperately seeking forgiveness, the mom showed Kaname an envelope, claiming it was a gift for her daughters. In the next scene, Kaname handed Nasa the envelope containing 2 hot spring tickets, explaining her deadbeat mom had won them in a contest. Generously, she offered them to Nasa and Tsukasa since Aya was busy studying for finals, and she'd be managing the bathhouse. Sensing Nasa's hesitation, Kaname persuaded him by suggesting it could be their honeymoon, causing him to accept. Later that day, Nasa shared the hot spring plan with Tsukasa, mentioning the open-air baths, which made them both shy about being alone. Reassuringly, Tsukasa reminded him they were married, and there was nothing to be ashamed about. The next day, they embarked on their trip, and en route, Nasa suggested taking the train, but Tsukasa was against it, recalling how Chidose and her maids had caused chaos on their last train journey. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, the maids informed Chidose of the hot spring trip and asked if they'd follow Nasa and Tsukasa. However, Chidose declined, citing her upcoming finals and busy schedule. On the other hand, Nasa and Tsukasa still traveled using the speed train, and upon getting to the hot spring, they marveled at how massive the place was and how crazy luxurious the interior was. After settling in, they agreed to spend an hour in separate open baths before exploring the town. While soaking, Nasa researched the city for their tour, Googling the resort's hot springs and renowned cuisine. With 40 minutes left, Nasa dashed out to meet Tsukasa for their outing. However, on his way, he bumped into an old vegetable who begged for help to the front desk. Nasa, trying to be a gentle, nice guy, obliged and decided to quickly assist the old hag and quickly return to his babe. Meanwhile, at the bathhouse, Aya fumed that Kaname had given the hot spring tickets away, insisting she also deserved to enjoy the baby girl lifestyle at the luxurious bath too. To appease her, Kaname promised Aya that she could use the bathhouse's big baths after customers left, exciting Aya. Later though, as Aya donned her swimsuit for the bath, Kaname, ever the trickster, handed her a broom, announcing she'd help clean instead, leaving Aya seething. It didn't stop there, as Kaname also somehow found a way to bring Chidose to the bathhouse to join in the cleaning. Chidose, however, furiously demanded to know why Kaname had tricked her into coming to the bathhouse to work. Kaname replied, saying she figured she would be lonely since Tsukasa was away on a hot spring. This only made Chidose even more pissed, as she said it still didn't add up to her helping her family business. Back at the hot spring, after aiding the old weirdo, Nasa hurried to rejoin Shikasa with minutes to spare, but the persistent oldie asked for help to her room. Frustrated, Nasa agreed to be of help, but while leading her to her room, the old disgusting woman kept prying into Nasa's married life and lamenting how her own husband had left her for a more younger and curvier chick. Just then, Shikasa bumped into them in the hallway, and on seeing the old woman, her facial expression changed, and she demanded to know what the wench was doing with her husband. Confused, Nasa asked Tsukasa if she knew who the nosy grandma was, to which Tsukasa answered, informing him that she was Tokiko, Chidose's grandmother. Hearing this, Nasa froze and started to apologize for not knowing the sile old woman, but Tsukasa, pissed, angrily asked Tokiko why she had tricked her husband and if it was a test. Tokiko replied saying she did all that just to get close to him. Tokiko added that she wouldn't have gone to such lengths if Shikasa had just introduced her husband to her family like all normal brides do. Formally, Nasa then introduced himself as Tsukasa's husband, and Tokiko also expressed her long-held desire to meet him. Noticing her spacious room, Nasa asked if she lived alone, to which Tokiko boasted that despite her scruffy look, she was a wealthy cougar who'd earned every yen. Complimenting Nasa, Tokiko noted Tsukasa chose him for his sweetness and smarts despite his Smeagol appearance, recalling how he'd identified a moon rock at the mansion. Impressed, Tokiko praised Tsukasa's choice of a brilliant partner, confident Nasa would achieve what she couldn't. Generously, Tokiko then handed Nasa a tour card, explaining it granted access to the town's 3 top day trip hot springs and could earn him a hot spring expert title. Angrily, Tsukasa stood, declaring they'd had enough of her antics, but Tokiko called her mean and then told Nasa his wife struggled to show love and needed work. Defiantly, Tsukasa snapped, saying she didn't need advice from an old wench. To ease the tension, Tokiko urged Tsukasa to occasionally heed advice despite her independence and then thanked Nasa for caring for her granddaughter. The following day, while browsing the manga shop, Nasa was bothered at the idea of sharing a hot spring with Tsukasa. However, just then, Tsukasa, dressed in a yukata, cut his thinking short by asking if the outfit looked great on her. Nasa instantly turned red like a tomato at seeing how cute she looked, and then complimented how great the outfit looked on her. Shortly afterwards, the couple utilized the tour card given to them by Tokiko to visit famous hot springs around the city. While standing close to a 300 years old wooden hot spring, Nasa took a photo of Tsukasa, which made her embarrassed. However, Nasa pointed out that since it was their honeymoon, it was best he captured every memory they shared. After snapping several photos, which clearly made Tsukasa really embarrassed, Nasa changed the subject by asking about the kind of relationship she had with Tokiko. Hesitantly, Tsukasa then explained that although they were not related by blood, the old fossil was technically her guardian, but according to Tsukasa, the clingy grandma constantly hovered over her like a cursed spirit from Jujutsu Kaisen, which irritated her so much. While casually strolling around, they stumbled upon an expensive restaurant with a very pricey steak. Tsukasa immediately pointed out how expensive the steak was, but Nasa stepped forward like his name was on the Forbes list, brushing off the price, and then bought the steak for her. Next, they visited a riverbed, but while standing by the river, Nasa remained preoccupied with the idea of bathing with Tsukasa back at the resort's open bath. Just then, they sighted an advert for an open-air bath for mixed bathing. But Tsukasa pointed out that she would be too embarrassed to go in without her swimsuit. Curious, Nasa then asked Tsukasa if she would love to visit the open-air bath, to which Tsukasa embarrassingly stated she would rather not. Later, back at the manga shop, Nasa reasoned it wasn't a big deal to ask Tsukasa to bathe together since they were married. So that night, during a lavish dinner at the resort, Nasa tried raising the topic, but chickened out at the last second. Afterward, relaxing in the lounge, Nasa wrestled internally over whether to ask her, and finally he mustered courage, donned his big boy pants, and asked Tsukasa if she'd join him in the bath. After a brief, momentarily awkward silence, Tsukasa said she found it impressive that Nasa could so casually relate his feelings. She then agreed only on the condition that Nasa got in the bath first. Immediately, Nasa stood up, and minutes later, our boy had gone fully unclad inside the bath, waiting for Tsukasa. Soon, the bathhouse lights dimmed, and Tsukasa entered, draped in a towel, and Nasa, now running on 2% brain cell capacity, instantly looked away like a useless virgin. Quietly, Tsukasa shed the towel and slipped in, and for a fleeting moment, silence thickened the air. Sensing the tension, Nasa tried breaking the silence, and the only thing the dumb midget could come up with was the moon was beautiful, and then stammered out that he loved her. But Shikasa only smiled sheepishly. As a result, Nasa nervously brought up what Tokiko said about Shikasa being unable to express her emotions, and the mere mention of the old woman's name irritated Shikasa, and she demanded to know why he was summoning the old witch. Nasa said he realized she had not been too direct with her emotions, but Shikasa countered that it wasn't true and said it's just that Nasa had the observation skills of a drunk raccoon and had failed to notice that she said she loved him in a fair amount. Nasa then challenged her to say it then, and hearing the request, Shikasa became flustered but finally declared that she loved him, which made Nasa happy, and they ended up splashing water on themselves. The following day, over a 5-star breakfast, Nasa noticed that his wife was unusually distant that morning and immediately assumed that the reason must be what Tokiko said about Shikasa being really shy at times. Meanwhile, Shikasa was dying of embarrassment over the bath they had together last night and couldn't bear to stare him in the face. As the resort stay ended, Nasa and Shikasa had a great time and were prepared to head back. However, before departing, Nasa suggested they bid Tokiko farewell, but Shikasa argued that they could see her whenever in Tokyo. Mid-sentence, however, Tokiko somehow materialized in their midst, like a horror villain, and pointed out that she was too busy to be summoned any time Shikasa liked. After which, she suggested they take a group photo, and even though Shikasa was against it, Nasa signaled for someone to take the photo. While heading home on the train, Shikasa remarked that she had a great time and would love it if they went for another trip just like this one. During the summer, after a few weeks of returning to the bathhouse, the atmosphere was hotter than hell, and because of this, Nasa and Shikasa got to discover that the AC in their room was just plain thrash. Unable to withstand the heat anymore, Nasa declared that he was going to get a new air conditioner, so they approached Kaname to seek permission to install a new air conditioner for their room. Kaname approved it, saying she had no problem with it, but cautioned that most times, a new AC won't get installed until after 2 weeks of purchase. Hearing this, Shikasa became anxious, wondering if she would have to endure the heat for another 2 weeks. However, Nasa, like the perfect henchman, declared that he would install it himself. So later that day, the couple headed to the electronics store and got themselves a brand new AC next. Nasa told Shikasa they'd need to rent special tools from a friend's shop. Upon entering the technical store, a black-haired chick named Nakiri spotted Nasa and asked what he wanted. However, Shikasa was getting green with jealousy by seeing how pretty and young the chick was. Nasa, on the other hand, told Nakiri that he wanted to borrow the tools for installing an air conditioner. Nakiri then moved deeper inside the store to get the tools, and just as she left, Shikasa demanded to know how Nasa and Nakiri knew each other. Nasa calmly mentioned that he and Nakiri attended the same middle school and were even classmates. After that explanation, Nasa turned to Nakiri and informed her that he was now a married man. At first, Nakiri acted like she didn't give a fudge about his marital life, and even when Nasa introduced Shikasa to her, she just ignored them and concentrated more on getting the tools. But when her last 2 brain cells finally clicked, she shouted like a maniac in disbelief that Nasa was hitched. Bursting with curiosity, she asked when he tied the knot, and Nasa said it was recent. Hearing this, Nakiri congratulated them, even handed a gift to them, but pressed to know how they met. Nasa eagerly mentioned that they met on the street, and it was bloody love at first sight. Nakiri, a bit concerned, pointed out that she initially thought Nasa would die a miserable, unloved loner like her, to which Nasa mentioned that she was right. He would have ended up an 80-year-old virgin if he didn't get to meet Shikasa, causing Shikasa to fluster from embarrassment. Later that night, Nasa installed the AC, but while he reeled over his achievement, Shikasa was concerned over the 80-year-old virgin statement he made at Nakiri's store. Sensing Shikasa was silent, Nasa asked her if she was feeling colder now that the AC had been installed, but Shikasa mentioned that she was still a bit hot and would need a bath. After taking a bath, she felt more refreshed, and seeing how satisfied she was, Nasa urged that they head to bed and then planned her a good night's sleep. Before going to bed, Nasa switched off the AC, but as they slept, the whole room was unbearably hot, making it impossible for Shikasa to get a single moment of sleep. So she woke Nasa up and asked him to switch the AC back, which Nasa agreed to for just an hour. Just few minutes with the AC on, the whole room was colder than the North Pole, and Nasa noticed that Shikasa was shivering from the intense cold, so he adjusted the temperature up. However, after sleeping a bit, Nasa noticed Shikasa took off her blanket and was getting really warm, so he decided to lower the temperature again. An hour later, the AC shut off, jolting Shikasa awake, so Nasa decided to leave it on all night. The next day, an underdeveloped child barged into the bathhouse, eyes shut, talking to Tsukasa while thinking she was talking to Kaname. The scrawny kid said she needed relationship advice, but when she noticed that it wasn't Kaname she was talking to, she started to fidget like a glitchy Cassandra. After regaining her composure, the girl said she would seek the advice from Tsukasa instead since Kaname was nowhere to be found. But Tsukasa mentioned that she wasn't interested in giving relationship advice to a flat maggot with nothing but pimples on her chest.
Emotional, damn it!
Tsukasa pointed out that even though she would agree to dish out any relationship advice, she didn't even know the name of the person she was giving it to. However, the girl stated that they didn't need to know each other's names before she gave her the advice. Realizing Tsukasa wasn't going to give any advice, the girl promised to style her hair in a pigtail if she just offered relationship advice to her. But still, Tsukasa declined, hinting that she worked in a bathhouse and didn't need to look like Nicki Minaj. Just as the girl slumped on the chair in defeat, Kaname returned from school, and on seeing the flat-chested Mowgli, she introduced her to Tsukasa as Kyumu, her classmate. Kaname also revealed to Tsukasa that Kyumu was a testament that there was no limitation to how dumb one person could be. After this, she then demanded to know why Kyumu wanted to see. Kyumu immediately began furious for being called a dumbass, and before the matter could escalate, Nissa walked in and greeted Kyumu. He also informed her that he was now a married man, shocking the girl to her core, who asked why he had chosen to settle with the evil Kaname. But Nissa quickly clarified that Kaname wasn't his wife, and then introduced Tsukasa to Kyumu. Changing the subject, Nissa casually informed Tsukasa that he was off to Nakiri's store to return the tools he used in fixing the AC and then left. Just as he left, Kyumu started grilling Tsukasa, asking her if she and Nissa were making water with their privates, which only made Tsukasa extremely embarrassed. So Tsukasa told her to shut her filthy mouth and seek the advice she came for from Kaname. Sternly, Kaname asked what Kyumu wanted, but the flustered girl forgot her question and stormed out, claiming ice cream would jog her memory. Meanwhile, at Nakiri's shop, still reeling from Nasa's marriage, Nakiri asked if it was worth it, admitting her fear of it. Thoughtfully, Nasa replied, saying it depended on the person one was married to, and then began to list all the incredible things he loved about his wife. Later that day, Tsukasa abruptly asked Nasa, engrossed in work, if he loved her, prompting an immediate affirmation from him. Puzzled, Nasa later confided in Kaname, wondering if he'd dared to make Tsukasa doubt his love. Kaname, channeling her inner Steve Harvey, remarked that his marital situation was intriguing, explaining that words held different meanings for men and women. She then likened Tsukasa to a cat, purring for affection when needy, then sternly advised Nessa to shower Tsukasa with attention. Emphasizing further, Kaname told Nessa that as Tsukasa's husband, he alone could whisper sweet nothings to her, and if he stopped, she'd never hear them again. So later, while working on his laptop, Nessa mulled over Kaname's advice to sweet-talk Tsukasa. But he had a problem, which was he lived all his life being a worthless nerd with zero love life, and had no need to say those kind of words to anyone. However, he was determined to give it a shot. So while watching TV, the Lord Farquaad told Tsukasa that she was hotter than the video vixens on screen, only to be met with her baffled stare. Undeterred, early the next morning, he complimented her sleepy face as cute, but predictably, she found him creepy. After his flattery flopped, Nasa decided practice was his only path to success, vowing to read shoujo manga to master the art of rizzing women. The next day, Tsukasa noticed Nasa devouring manga during work breaks with unusual focus. Mischievously, she grabbed Toast and plopped the cat on his head, prompting the evil cat to claw at Nasa's scalp. Seeing even that didn't deter Nasa's manga obsession, Tsukasa hatched another prank, offering a shoulder massage. Eagerly, Nasa agreed, only for her to tickle him relentlessly. Annoyed, he begged her to stop targeting his sensitive spots, and she apologized, promising restraint, only to tickle him more like a playful pup. Laughing, she apologized again, confessing she did it because he was too absorbed in manga, then curiously asked why he'd started reading it. Nervously, Nasa stammered that there was no real reason, but Tsukasa pressed even more. Noticing Nasa was reluctant to say the reason, Tsukasa pulled the ancient move of deception by clapping his lips, giving the certified simp no choice but to spill that he was studying to express his love better. He admitted that he had learned that once a person was married, they had to learn how to tell their partner sweet confessions of love daily. Nasa confessed that he used the manga to study but got hooked on it and just couldn't stop reading. Tsukasa then asked to see the result of his study, leaving Nasa embarrassed. Nasa demanded to know if she was being serious, to which Tsukasa declared that she was super serious. Feeling utterly embarrassed, Nesa confessed that he loved her the most in the entire universe, but Tsukasa was dissatisfied and asked him to be more specific with his love confession and tell her just how much he loved her. Nasa froze but remarked that every time he saw her, he loved her even more, causing Tsukasa's cheeks to turn red crimson. Later that night, while Nesa was having a bath, Kanama suddenly appeared in the male bathhouse asking if he and his wife ever bathed together. Nesa immediately got pissed and yelled, asking why she entered the bathhouse while his millimeter Peter was dangling outside. But Kanama asked him to chill and said his tiny willy was not enough to tickle her fancy. Damn! To answer her question, Nesa remarked that when they got a new apartment, he and his wife would surely have baths together every day. However, Kanama responded by asking why wait when they could have one immediately. She told him that business hours were over, and with all the customers gone, he and Tsukasa could bath together. She assured him that he could go into the women bathhouse, and she would lock the door behind, so no one would disturb them. With that, Nesa immediately got excited and agreed to go in, but Tsukasa, who had overheard everything, initially declined, but after a slight push by Kanama, she agreed and then asked that the lights be turned off. Wasting no time, Kanama moved outside of the bathhouse and then switched off the lights, prompting Nesa to silently move into the women's bathhouse and then join Tsukasa inside the bathtub. However, cautiously, Tsukasa warned Nesa to keep his distance since the clear water revealed her dong dumplings in 4K, shocking him. Nonetheless, overcome with desire, Nesa leaned in, kissing her deeply. Breathless, Tsukasa asked him to turn away, then exited the tub, wrapped a towel around her chest, and headed to the sauna, inviting him along. Wasting no time, Nasa jumped out of the bathtub and rushed into the sauna, only to realize the place was hotter than hell. But even with the intense heat, Nasa was determined to stay inside the scorching sauna for the love of his wife. He then sat close to Tsukasa while Tsukasa revealed that she loved how hot the sauna was. Nasa asked how long she usually stayed in the sauna, to which Tsukasa replied, saying as long as possible. Furthermore, she stated that she treated the sauna as a battle against herself to test her limit. After saying that, she moved forward and created more steam to increase the hotness of the room, and then stated that the challenge was about to start. Following that, Tsukasa inquired from Nesa if he liked the saunas. Honestly, Nesa admitted he struggled, finding 3 minutes unbearable, but Tsukasa corrected him, teaching that the first 3 minutes acclimated the body, unlocking heat tolerance with persistence. In addition, Tsukasa assured him that if he could endure the first 3 minutes, he had unlocked the first door to enduring the intense heat, and if he persisted longer, the heat would spread over his body, and his body would become comfortable. With that, Tsukasa asked Nesa to bear the first 3 minutes with her so they could unlock the first door together. Meanwhile, at the front desk, I approached Kanama, asking if the bath was prepared because she had an intention of entering the female bathhouse, but Kanama refused her to enter the female bathhouse, informing her that Nesa and his wife were having a private time, and then suggested she use the men's bathhouse instead. I agreed, unaware that Ginga had dozed off inside the male sauna. At the same time, inside the female sauna, Nesa was finding it very hard to endure the terrible heat, but when he turned to Tsukasa, he realized she was taking it all in like a true alpha female. This motivated him to man up, so he grabbed her hand to have some physical contact, and then kissed her on the cheek. With such affection, Tsukasa mentioned that the place was already hot and wouldn't want to get her inside boiling over 100 degrees, but Nesa dropped a pickup line by telling her that his feelings for her were hotter than even the sauna, throwing Tsukasa into a bit of shyness. As they were about to go for a second round of intense kissing, they heard screams outside of the bathhouse. They immediately moved to check, and they realized it was A who was yelling at Ginga for catching a glimpse of her holy sanctuary while inside the male bathhouse. Shortly afterwards, Tsukasa informed Nesa that the remote control to the DVR was broken. Nesa asked to have a look, and when he did, he noticed that the batteries were dead, so he fixed new batteries and the remote started working immediately. Seeing how easily Nesa had fixed up the remote, Tsukasa felt useless and remarked that Nesa must think she was one hell of a dummy. But Nesa swiftly reassured her that wasn't the case. Observing how sensitive she was, Nesa reflected on her strength, never flinching. Even when a tatted-faced douchebag entered the bathhouse, she stood her ground. Snapping him out of thinking, Tsukasa complained that her phone was playing tricks on her. She further clarified that the device kept notifying her that her password was wrong, and then Tsukasa suggested that her password must have been changed by some super hacker. Nesa calmly asked her if she had changed her password since he had set it up for her, to which Tsukasa mentioned that she hadn't. That being the case, Nesa collected the phone, tapped 05 times, and unlocked the phone. Seeing this, Tsukasa was amazed that Nesa memory could retain such information. To prevent Tsukasa from forgetting the password again, Nesa then suggested he manage her password for her, which made Tsukasa excited. Nesa then inquired to know how Tsukasa had managed her devices before they got married, to which Tsukasa mentioned that Tokiko was the tech whiz responsible for handling anything involving technology in the mansion. Hearing this, Nesa commented that he liked how things like technology gave her a hard time, but Tsukasa, pissed at hearing this, asked him not to call her a brain-dead moron and then assured him that she was the kind of chick that picked up fast on things. To appease her, Nesa promised to get her cake, but Tsukasa initially disagreed, claiming to be a high-class chick, but later settled for the cake. However, before leaving, she turned and thanked Nasa for always being reliable. Nasa walked up to her, hugged her from the back, and mentioned that he loved the scent of her hair. Later that afternoon, Nasa approached Kaname and bored her to death with tales of how funny and cute his wife was until Yanagi appeared, sparing her. While in the room, Nasa asked Yanagi what brought her, and she announced a forthcoming wedding. Hearing this, Nasa and Tsukasa immediately congratulated her, but Yanagi pointed out that there was a problem. Curious, Nasa asked if she was worried about marrying Taniguchi, which shocked Yanagi, so she demanded to know how Nasa knew she was dating Taniguchi. Through a flashback, Nasa refused, telling her that he and Tsukasa had caught her and the punk exchanging salivas at the park earlier on. So instead, he told her that when they saw them at the theme park earlier on, they seemed to be getting along. Pressing on, Nasa demanded to know her concerns about marrying Taniguchi. In response, Yanagi asked Nasa if there was anything he was worried about when it came to marriage. Nasa responded by saying there was nothing in particular, just that he was a little bit anxious whether someone as ugly as him was allowed to marry someone so wonderful. In turn, Nasa then asked Yanagi if she was nervous about getting married. Thoughtfully, Yanagi then recounted that one time she and Taniguchi had gone out on a beef bowl date, and she was so excited to be on a date with someone she loved. But then when the beef bowls arrived, Taniguchi was packing so much ginger on the bowl of beef like a madman who had a beef with ginger. When she inquired as to why he was eating so much ginger, the moron explained that he started eating beef that way after reading a certain manga, and even in this said manga, it was stated that it was actually a bad practice. Baffled, Nasa and Tsukasa asked why he kept it up, knowing that. Yanagi said she asked him the same question, but the guy just claimed it was something she could only understand when she experienced it. However, he wouldn't want Yanagi to eat the way he does, and would want her to remain normal. Curiosity piqued, Yanagi stated that she decided to give the dish a try too, and after she anxiously took her first bite, it was so disgusting she had to leave the restaurant. But after 2 days, she started having an insatiable craving for a beef bowl filled with ginger. And that was when she realized what Taniguchi was actually talking about, that beef with ginger was like a beefy swamp impossible to escape from. On the other hand, Nasa and Tsukasa were confused and struggling to see the issue. However, Nasa tried telling her that people change and it was not a bad thing. But Yanagi remarked that she didn't want to grow into an inbred freak who was obsessed with eating a big pile of red ginger on a beef bowl. Nasa said he understood and then asked if she actually discussed all that with Taniguchi. Yanagi said she didn't because she was scared he would stop loving her when he got to find out that she was now a creep-obsessed beefy Krabby Patties. However, Nasa, still trying to even understand what was going on, advised Yanagi that she still had to be honest with Taniguchi. With that, Yanagi said she understood and then said she would try talking to him. Nasa and Tsukasa then bid the four-eyed teacher goodnight, hoping things worked out for her. Over the next week, Nasa gorged on Tsukasa's cooking, and weighing himself, he was shocked to see he'd fattened up. But then, while watching Tsukasa make dinner, Nasa noticed that even though they ate the same food, she remained slim, making him wonder what was going on. So he hugged her out of nowhere to confirm if she was truly not getting fat. However, in the process, Tsukasa noticed that Nasa was gaining weight and then pointed it out, causing Nasa to feel embarrassed. Tsukasa figured she must be responsible for Nasa slowly becoming SpongeBob Patrick because she had been feeding him too much food, but Nasa mentioned that she wasn't at fault, but he had been overeating. Determined, Nasa remarked that henceforth he was going to start exercising. So the next day, Tsukasa and Kaname discussed how Nasa planned to start running 10 kilometers a day. However, Tsukasa doubted if Nasa could be fit to even exercise. But Kaname then explained that back in school, Nasa didn't join any sports or clubs because he was trying to maintain an all-A grade. At that moment, Nasa interrupted the conversation, bragging that in school, He exercised harder than an IG fitness coach, and also after school, he did few physical jobs, so running 10 kilometers was just as easy as changing a pair of socks. After making that bold claim, Nasa took off running, but just after running 1 kilometer, he was panting more than an exhausted donkey on Ozempic. However, seeing how much Nasa was pushing himself, Shikasa decided to join him in the running. Motivated, Nasa decided to do some chin-ups, but the extraordinary weight of his enormous head was preventing him from going up. Feeling utterly disappointed in himself, Shikasa tried to comfort Nasa and then assured him that she would always be with him to keep him safe. Later that day, while they were about to have lunch, Tokiko suddenly appeared like some Disney witch. Shocked and annoyed, Shikasa demanded to know what her skinny old was doing in their crib. Boldly, Tokiko claimed that she did them a favor by coming to their crib since they hardly visited her. Following that, she said she would love to go camping and then demanded they invite her on a camping trip. Sensing Shikasa hesitation, Tokiko explained that camping helped heal the exhaustion of the heart, and in the wood, one soul would unite with the heaven and earth, and then recover a bit of their true nature. Still, Shikasa was totally against going camping with the old hag, but Nasa drummed in support. In defense, Nasa confessed that he hadn't gone camping before since birth and would love to go. Hearing this, Tokiko then set the camping for next week, although Shikasa immediately protested. Tokiko guilt-tripped her into agreeing by citing her frail age and how she could die at any time. With no choice, Shikasa agreed, which made Tokiko happy. So before leaving, Tokiko gave them a gift, which triggered memories for Shikasa of when she was just a child and was found by Tokiko. The following morning, while having breakfast, Shikasa still didn't see any point in heading to the mountains just to stargaze. To change Nasa's mind, she warned him that the mountains were swarming with bugs during the summer that could devour him alive. But Nasa, still all excited to go, claimed it would be better if they went somewhere high to gaze at the night sky. Stubbornly, Shikasa countered that city skyscrapers like Shibuya offered rooftops with grassy beds for couples to cuddle and stargaze. Sometime later, Ai, holding the camping flyer, excitedly told Kanami that she would be joining Nasa and Shikasa for the camping. She backed up her decision by claiming that camping had a kind of appeal that was quite seductive. With that decision made later on, Kanami informed Nasa and Shikasa that she and her sister Ai would love to tag along. Nasa replied, saying they were cool with it, and then informed her that if they weren't sure about how to set up a tent, there would be glamping amenities for that. But Shikasa informed them that Tokiko owned the properties and everything on it. Shikasa also revealed that Tokiko had bought the properties specifically for stargazing. Suddenly, Kyoma materialized from thin air, shouting that she would also like to go. The creep told them that the reason was her deranged father had always told her to make sure she buried someone up in the mountains. However, Nasa tried correcting her that wasn't the essence of camping. Kanan also chimed in and then asked Kyoma to remember the anime they watched about camping a while back. So after some thought, Kyoma remembered and was even more excited to go camping. Nasa then said since everyone would be going then, he would also love to invite Jinga. With that, Nasa also invited Ginga for the camping, but Jinga said he would love to go only if I was also going, to which Nasa assured him that I was also going. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, the maids asked Chidose if she would also be going camping. Chidose replied, saying of course she would be going as she wouldn't want to miss seeing Nasa get crushed by Mother Nature. Curious, Charlotte asked if she had gone camping before, to which Chidose replied, saying she had learned everything there was to camping by watching Mr. Beast's channel. Later that night, while coming back from the convenience store, Nasa, still all excited about camping, mused that with all their friends and families attending the camp, it almost felt like a wedding reception. The following day, everyone was prepped for camping, so Aurora briefed them on the routes around the mountain and how not to get lost. She also informed them that they could go hiking if they wanted, which excited Nasa, so he immediately raised his hands, declaring he would love to go hiking. But Shikasa tried cautioning Nasa that it was a 4-hour trek, but Nasa had already lost his mind and was still determined to go. So, with no other choice, Shikasa also mentioned that she would also join in the hiking. On camping day, while hiking, I was already exhausted. At that moment, the group realized Kim had suddenly gone missing, so Shikasa offered to go search for the weirdo and then dashed off at incredible speed like a ninja, leaving the rest of the team stunned. Sometime later, Shikasa finally found Kyoma staring at a flower like a lost puppy, and noticing this, Shikasa explained that the flower was called Cape Jasmine, whose fruit was used in the past to treat bleeding and inflammation. As they began towards the rest of the team, Kyoma sighted a mushroom, but Shikasa warned her not to touch or eat the mushroom or risk getting clapped to the afterlife. Tsukasa lectured her that if she found a mushroom in the mountains, it was absolutely not advisable to eat it because it could be poisonous. Meanwhile, elsewhere, while climbing higher the mountains, Nasa encountered Chidose, who claimed she wanted to see how Nasa was coping, but just then, they were joined by Tsukasa and Kyoma, and then Tsukasa suggested they kept walking. While walking, Nasa, noticing how fast Tsukasa was, asked her if she liked mountain climbing. Tsukasa replied, saying she hated it because it made her realize people invented cars and trains for a reason. Shortly afterwards, Nasa dreamt about the day he and Tsukasa first met, but was jerked back to reality by Tsukasa. Disoriented, Nasa demanded to know where they were, to which Tsukasa explained that they had arrived at the campground. Scanning the environment, Nasa said he liked the woods because it was pretty quiet, and then suggested that since they were pretty much alone, they kissed. But Tsukasa instantly got flustered and mentioned that she would be embarrassed if anyone caught them smooching their tongues. However, just then, Tokiko popped out of nowhere and then told them to get a room already. But this infuriated Tsukasa, who shouted, asking why the old witch kept popping her annoying crusty body everywhere like Temu advert. Teasingly, Tokiko then mentioned that she could tell that Nasa was already bricked up to smooch, to which Nasa eagerly agreed that he was. Gratefully, Nasa complimented Tokiko on how beautiful her park was. She thanked him and then explained that she bought the property because of how lovely the view of the stars was. Tokiko also revealed that night was going to be special because she had prepared a treat for them, but if only Tsukasa was willing to loosen up. Before she left, she informed the couple that she had prepared a glamping tent for just the two of them for where they would be staying that night. Just as Tokiko left, Nasa turned to Tsukasa and remarked that Chidose had once asked him why he had agreed to get her. Nasa stated that at first he struggled to reply, but now he realized it was because Tsukasa was special to him. After that heartfelt conversation, Nasa and Tsukasa started heading back to the campsite, but found the rest of the team bathing in a river together with Chidose and her maid, so they decided to let them be and go for a walk. Just then, they came across a stream, and Tsukasa cited that she would love to wade, but her long gown would make it difficult. To help, Nasa offered to lift the gown up to prevent it from getting wet, but ended up licking her ears like a horny dog, which made Tsukasa sing the song of the heavens. Upon getting to the camp, Nasa and Tsukasa were told that Kyoma, the annoying roach, had gone missing again, so Nasa suggested they searched everywhere for her. However, after searching for a while, Nasa also somehow got lost. He then tried to retrace his way back to the others, but only ended up even wandering too far. With his legs getting exhausted, he decided to get some rest but drifted off to La La Land. Meanwhile, back at the camp, I informed Tsukasa that they had found Kyoma, but the problem now was that her husband was also missing. While in Slumberland, Nasa relived the night he had an accident and found Tsukasa for the first time. But just then, Tsukasa called his name and snapped him out of Slumberland. She told him it was risky to fall asleep deep in the wood because the pest could feed on him, and then suggested they join with the others at the camp just in time for the barbecue. Watching Tsukasa stroll under the glowing moon, Nasa remembered the night he first met her and how she had also walked under the moon like some goddess. This prompted Nasa to ask Tsukasa why she insisted that night that he had to marry her before they could date. Tsukasa was at first hesitant to reply, but after much persistence from Nasa, she agreed and revealed that if most guys got that kind of condition from a girl they barely knew, they would be confused or just fall silent. But in Nasa's case, he had agreed instantly without a single suspicion, doubt, or distrust. So because he was willing to trust her first by answering right away, she also decided to trust him. Later that night, back at the camp, there was much to eat and drink, prompting Tsukasa to ask Tokiko why she was spending so much money like some drug lord. Before Tokiko could answer, a presentation started on stage hosted by Kanama. The presentation recounted how Nasa was almost flattened by Truck-kun, but was saved by Tsukasa. But right after saving him, Tsukasa vanished for 2 years, but for those 2 years, Nasa was busy searching for her tirelessly, desperate to see her again. Even when exhaustion and illness kicked in, Nasa persisted until his birthday, when the two lovebirds reunited at last and finally got married. At the end of the emotional presentation, everyone applauded, but furiously, Tsukasa demanded why Kaname had aired their love story publicly. Kaname, now joined by Tokiko, explained that was exactly what people do at a wedding reception, shocking Tsukasa and Nasa. Tokiko chimed in, saying she had planned the wedding reception, and since everyone who loved them was gathered in one place, it would be a total waste not to have the wedding reception. She said she wasn't feeding them for free, and the little presentation of their love story was pretty touching. That said, Kaname then announced that the stars of the occasion should take the stage. Nasa walked up the stage. While on the stage, Kaname rallied everyone to clap for the newlyweds and then announced that they would be saying a few words. Hearing this, Nasa and Tsukasa froze at the spot. Then Kaname pointed at Nasa and asked him to give the speech as the man. With that, Kaname handed him the mix, so Nasa started off by thanking everyone for joining them. Then he went on to nervously talk about how much he loved his wife and cherished her. In addition, he announced that as a couple, they would need the support of everyone gathered and then bowed out in appreciation. Everyone was quite impressed by his bold speech and clapped for him, and then gleefully, Kaname mentioned that there was another surprise. She revealed a wedding cake and then explained that she had to go through so much stress just to bring the cake down to the mountain. Before Nasa and Tsukasa could cut the cake, Tokiko placed a wedding gown veil on Tsukasa's head. Tsukasa looked rather displeased than happy, but Nasa complimented that the veil really looked beautiful on her. With that, the couple cut the wedding cake, and everyone congratulated them. While watching everyone enjoy the cake, Nasa inwardly questioned why people got married. He remembered that, according to ancient Egypt, people would put rings on their left finger during wedding ceremonies. Later that night, Nasa, while staring at the stars in the sky, expertly explained to the team about the different types of stars. Admiringly, Kaname complimented Nasa's big brain power, while the rest of the team marveled as to how Nasa could name all the individual stars when they all looked pretty much the same. Tsukasa approached Nasa and offered to get him some coffee. While having coffee, Nasa thanked Kaname for everything she did, to which Kaname said it was great to have a celebration. Turning to Chitose, Nasa noted that it's been a while since they last talked and then mentioned that something Chitose said back then really stuck with him. Nasa mentioned that back then, when Chitose had asked why they got married, he couldn't give a reply, but now he could explain better. Nasa pointed out that he got married because he loved Tsukasa, but then falling in love with someone doesn't guarantee the need to get married. Just then, mid-conversation, Tokiko walked towards them and called Nasa a hopeless romantic, and then suggested she would love to have a chat with Nasa under the stars. Tsukasa immediately protested, but the Tokiko asked her to chill. She wasn't interested in her man-child husband's 2-inch willy.
Emotional, damn it!
With them being alone, Tokiko inquired to know how marriage life was treating Nasa, to which Nasa replied saying every day he learned something new. Tokiko then also apologized by saying it was her fault that it took 2 years for he and Tsukasa to be reunited. The old fossil explained that Tsukasa had been indulged in a selfish request of hers for 2 years, which was why she was grateful that Nasa waited for her for 2 years. Tokiko also asked Nasa if he could remember the night he met his wife, to which Nasa responded honestly by saying right after Tsukasa insisted that they must marry before she agreed to date him, he lost consciousness and ended up in the hospital. Nevertheless, Nasa pointed out that he was indeed happy he took the major step by deciding to marry Tsukasa. That said, Tokiko told Nasa that earlier on, he was talking about his reasons for getting married and then urged him to ask Tsukasa the same questions, promising that he would be shocked to hear Tsukasa's reasons, but he should make sure they were alone when he asked her the question. So after the conversation, Nasa rushed to meet up with Tsukasa so he could ask her the questions. Eventually, he got to meet her gazing at the moon, and as they started talking, Nasa told her that Tokiko instructed him to ask her why people got married. Hearing this, Tsukasa stepped forward and said the big reason for her was that no one lived forever. She expatiated by saying no matter how wealthy a person was or even if their names went down in history, one day they would suddenly be gone. With that in mind, she explained that people tend to believe that if nothing else lasts, their love will last. She added that even if their bodies fell apart, the love they shared would live on eternally. She then walked straight into Nasa's embrace, saying marriage was, for better or worse, in joy and in sorrow. Upon getting back to the camp, they found the glamping tent prepared for them, and getting inside, they were stunned to find a king-size bed nicely dressed as a plot arena. After so many thoughts of how to get down to business, Nasa finally placed his hands on Tsukasa's shoulders and then told Tsukasa that although the stars were pretty, she was prettier. With that in mind, Nasa summoned the courage of a drunk man and told Tsukasa that he would love to look at the stars on the bed. So Nasa dimmed the lights, and they both laid beside each other nervously, and Nasa immediately grabbed her shoulder. Just then, Nasa confessed that he had a nice time and then told Tsukasa that she smelled really nice. Meanwhile, reflecting on her past, Tokiko remembered when she once went on a space expedition to the moon. There she picked up the moon rock, which was inside the protective case displayed in the mansion. The following morning, while gazing at the full view of the early morning sunset up the mountains, Nasa was overjoyed, especially waking up to a king-size bed for the first time in his life. Just then, Tokiko interrupted his peaceful thinking and then asked if he wanted coffee. While having coffee, Tokiko remarked that a beautiful morning view up the mountains was something best suited for couples, so Nesa should have shared it with his wife, Tsukasa. Following that, Tokiko presented a bread from one of the best bakeries in China and then told Nesa that it was Tsukasa's favorite bread. She placed the bread in a multi-roaster and then informed Nesa that spreading the bread with French butter gives it a unique taste. After the preparation, Nesa had a taste of the bread, causing his taste buds to tingle. Grateful, Tokiko then thanked Nasa for allowing her to join in his morning view of the sunset, and just as she was about to tell him something important, Tsukasa interrupted the conversation, claiming that she smelled something amazing. Wasting no time, Tsukasa grabbed the entire loaf of bread and then ordered Tokiko to roast some for her just the way they did theirs. Seeing how rudely authoritative Tsukasa was, Tokiko teasingly asked Nesa if he was sure he married his missing rib because, judging by how arrogant Tsukasa was, she could tell he married a mafia thug's missing rib. However, Nesa assured Tokiko that he didn't intend to marry anyone else apart from Tsukasa. Several days later, Nesa and Tsukasa were back from the camping trip, and they couldn't stop discussing the surprise wedding reception and everyone's joy. Nesa also pointed out how Tsukasa looked really cute with a veil on, but just as Tsukasa thanked him for the compliment, Nesa had a flashback of when Tokiko was about to tell him something important, making him wonder what was so important the oldie wanted to tell him. Just then, his landlord called. Nesa picked up the phone, and after a brief convo, Nesa dropped the call. Tsukasa then asked what the issue was, to which Nesa informed her that the landlord called to inform him that their burned apartment building was almost completely reconstructed. Nesa also informed Tsukasa that they would not be staying at the bathhouse for long and should be able to move into the furnished apartment in no time. Nesa then asked Tsukasa if she would love to go check out the apartment building, to which she agreed. So later that day, the couple went to the site of the newly constructed apartment, and while staring at it, they were impressed with the renovations going on. Realizing the apartment was way bigger than how it used to be, Nesa hoped that the apartments had bathtubs, but just after making that statement, they both became flustered, knowing the statement came from a dirty mind. Changing the subject quickly, Tsukasa asked if they would be getting a bed now, to which Nasa confirmed that they would, and this time even a double bed. On getting to the bathhouse, Nesa and Tsukasa thought about how they were going to move their stuffs out of the bathhouse. Just then, Kanama stormed inside the room, calling Nesa a horndog and asking if they were seriously moving out. Before Nasa could even respond, Kanama called him a perv and asked if he had any problem staying in the bathhouse. Nesa calmly explained that they had just borrowed the room to stay in, not like they were staying in the bathhouse indefinitely. But just then, Tsukasa entered the room and assured Kanama that she would never be lonely. Tsukasa also informed Kanama that even if they moved out of the bathhouse, she would still be working the front desk at the bathhouse, and even Nasa could still be using the room as an office. Later that night, while taking a stroll, Nesa and Tsukasa discussed their plan for their new home. Nasa remarked that getting a new apartment was getting them closer to being a real husband and wife. Just then, out of nowhere, Nesa hugged Tsukasa, but Tsukasa pushed him away slightly and said since they were married, they should be able to communicate freely. Nesa replied, saying yes, of course they should. Hearing this, Tsukasa mentioned that she had been holding for too long to express herself, and then asked Nesa to promise he won't get mad when she did. Nesa responded by promising he wouldn't, so Tsukasa, pointing her finger at him, declared that his hug was as as his crusty face.
Emotional, damn it!
Plummeting Nesa into a dark abyss of shock. Seeing how depressed Nesa was, Tsukasa tried to calm him down by explaining that what she meant was that he hugged girls like he was some prison inmate on a death sentence. As a solution, Tsukasa advised that Nesa hug girls more gently by placing his arms under and not above. After the master class on hugging, Tsukasa decided to give it a try by hugging like normal couples, and after they did, Nesa was shocked that Tsukasa's way of hugging was way better than his barbaric way. Just then, Tsukasa asked Nesa if there was anything he would also love to let out of his chest. Nesa replied saying there was a lot, giving Tsukasa a total shock. Firstly, Nesa asked if he could be allowed to touch her when she slept, but when he realized Tsukasa changed disgusted facial expression, Nesa began to vibrate like a faulty device, explaining that he didn't mean to mess with her when she slept. Nesa explained that what he meant was that she was a heavy sleeper who always ended up rolling over whenever she slept, exposing her belly. So all he wanted was that whenever she rolled like that, he needed permission to be able to cover her up. This, Tsukasa declined and vehemently declared that she was not a messy sleeper. Meanwhile, Tokiko, while staring at the moon rock, recalled that years ago, Shikasa had firmly stated that she could only have 2 years of her life, nothing more. Shikasa asked that after that 2 years, Tokiko would allow her to leave her life, and Tokiko would also stop living for her sake, but would also live her life. Back in the present, Tokiko opened the moon rock casing, took out the rock, and while still staring at it, she slummed. The following day, Shikasa got a call from Chitose informing her that Tokiko had fainted. So later that day, Nasa and Shikasa rushed to the hospital to see Tokiko, but on getting into Tokiko's ward, they realized the old weasel was way better than a Yunjin. Tokiko then reassured Shikasa not to worry too much about her health condition, and then explained that she just felt dizzy and would be discharged the next day. Then Tokiko said she was going out to grab a coffee and handed her Nintendo handheld to Shikasa to continue with the game. Noticing Tokiko's weak stride, Nasa excused himself, telling Shikasa that he would be back. Nasa met up with Tokiko outside of the hospital and asked her if she was sincerely fine. Realizing Nasa had caught on to her pretense, Tokiko demanded to know how Nasa had figured out that she wasn't fine, to which Nasa explained that he found out from the unusually slow manner she walked. Impressed, Tokiko mentioned that Nasa was a pretty smart young man, but warned that he shouldn't tell Shikasa of her frail health condition. Nasa promised he won't and then demanded to know what she wanted to tell him back then at the campground. Tokiko remarked that Nasa was pretty smart for remembering, and then asked that they take a walk. As they walked, Tokiko revealed that there was something she spent her entire life trying to do, but her part in it ended before the thing even came to fruition. Tokiko said even though she had failed to accomplish it, she didn't regret a thing and then handed Nasa the moon rock. Nasa was shocked and stammered that he didn't deserve such a precious item, but Tokiko replied, saying it was just a regular stone with no magic powers. However, Tokiko revealed that the stone took a millennia of human effort to collect. Turning to Nasa, Tokiko demanded that he please do all he could to make Shikasa happy. Nasa then assured her that as long as he lived, he would do all he could to make Shikasa happy. Suddenly, Shikasa stormed outside of the hospital, angry that they had left her alone inside. She immediately started to bitch about it, but Tokiko just nudged her forward straight into Nasa's embrace. As Tokiko left, Nasa revealed to Shikasa that he had promised Tokiko that he would always make her happy no matter what. The end. If you enjoyed this recap, clap the like button and insult the main character anyhow you want in the comment section below. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're yet to for more plot-filled adventures. If you like anime recaps like this, watch this video right here.